Different choices result in the birth of multiple realities, and in this case, it does not change. The emergence of the Venom symbiote is caused by a miscalculation of power and ability on Wanda's part. Come, let's watch and see how it all plays out. Captain America's life flashed before his own eyes. He was currently facing Brock Rumlow, who was now Crossbones. Steve had managed to defeat him with the help of Wanda and Natasha, the Black Widow, and Sam Wilson. They had all managed to get Brock cornered. They had all said in their minds, but they were wrong. Brock Rumlow was in proximity with Steve Rogers, and he decided to get his revenge by blowing himself up with Steve Rogers. Captain America did not expect a move like that, and he was totally caught off guard, as his life flashed before his own eyes. Wanda, however, was faster than him, and when Brock Rumlow initiated the explosion, she conjured a force field that contained the explosion and saved Captain America's life, as well as the other lives and the bystanders. Not yet, Wanda said in her mind, as containing the explosion was a lot more difficult than she thought. Wanda started levitating the energy field, as she wanted to take it as far away from civilization as possible, but she only succeeded in lifting it a few stories up, as the strain was too much on her. Wanda was slipping when she saw a flash of her brother's death in her eyes. No, I could have saved him. I should have done better. I'm a failure, were the thoughts that ran through her head. Suddenly, Wanda felt this rage boil at her core, and she pulled on it as she imagined sending the explosion to a place far away. The force field containing the explosion quickly reacted and started glowing red until it was too bright to look at. Suddenly, there was a rippling sound, and the light ceased, and the force field was gone. Before Wanda passed out, she saw a black goo dripping from the sky via a dark void she must have created, and she quickly stretched her hands towards it. Wanda pulled on the rapidly declining surge of power that she had suddenly felt, and with that, the hole was closed, and everything went dark for Wanda. Steve Rogers, Black Widow, and Falcon immediately rushed to aid Wanda. Steve arrived first, and he was able to break her fall to the ground. Steve looked at her face and felt immense gratitude to her, because he knew that he would have been dead if not for Wanda. "Thank you," he muttered silently to her. Steve quickly ordered the rest of the team to move out, and within moments, they were well on their way out of Africa. Nobody paid attention to the black goo that had dripped from the hole, and it was currently stirring. A very curious Nigerian man saw what was happening, and he decided to check it out. When he went closer to the black goo, it stopped moving, and then he leaned in for a closer look, and the goo launched itself at him. The man had no time to react, and he was completely engulfed by the black goo, amidst the screams of witnesses. Wakanda citizens who were healthy outreached members who were currently watching from above, but they were also spies, and 2 of them were trained like no other soldier on Earth. They also had vibranium weapons, which were indestructible. They decided not to interfere, as it was against their code and policy, until the carnage began. The black goo had completely merged itself with the man, and now he was currently murdering and swallowing up people. The monster looked hideous, with 2 white patches for his eyes and a large tongue, among with razor-sharp like teeth. "I can sense that Eddie is not here. How did I get here?" The creature asked itself, as it had eliminated some of the witnesses and the remaining ran away. The creature was lucky that the first person he had merged with was at least semi-compatible. The human just lacked willpower, and it made things easier for the creature, as he could do anything, but it knew it could not use the human as a host for long. "Where am I?" the creature asked itself out loud, and he was answered with a painful slash from the back. The Wakandan warriors had decided to interfere, as there were no witnesses. The first warrior had slashed at the creature's back, and he had its full attention, which was part of the plan. The creature had wailed in pain as he advanced on his attacker. A vibranium spear projected out of its chest, and the first warrior smiled. His plan had worked. He wanted to create a distraction so that his teammate could kill the creature unnoticed and swiftly. "Not so powerful now, are you?" the first warrior said as he approached the creature. Those were his last steps. The creature suddenly held him and drove him through the spear that was still impaled in it. The Wakandan warrior was stunned, even as his life embedded away. "What are you?" he managed to ask as he choked on his own blood. "We are Venom," the creature shouted as it bit off his head and removed the spear from his chest, which healed almost instantly. Venom immediately used the spear to impale the other warrior, and he heard gasps from above. Venom looked up and saw the other Wakandans, Outreach health workers, and he grinned. And it was a scary sight to behold. "More food," Venom said. Within only a few minutes, all of the citizens were killed, and Venom was contemplating on his next line of action. When he heard police sirens, Venom immediately decided that it was not worth the risk to stay and fight, so he took off. As Venom wandered through the city, before he could enter a body of water, he spotted a newspaper, and on it, he saw the headline, "Spider-Man, a hero or a villain?" The picture was a person with a spider costume, swinging through the city, and immediately Venom hissed. Venom was sure that this was the only person that he would be fully compatible with, and that he had to get to him immediately. "I'm coming for you, Peter Parker," Venom hissed as he jumped in to the body of water. Everything the past few months had been a blur of uncontrolled events for Steve Rogers, and today was even worse. Today was Peggy Carter's funeral. She had died in her sleep. Captain America stared on as they went on with the funeral, and he casted his mind on what had happened to him in the Avengers in the past few days. Steve shrined as he realized that it could mean the end of the Avengers altogether. Steve remembered very closely when Agent Ross had summoned all of them and told them that because of the events of Ultron and the recent events that happened in Lagos, Nigeria, which claimed the lives of innocent civilians and also Wakandan health workers, the United Nations had decided that an independent body would be formed to take charge over the Avengers. Even though Steve had expected the government to try and take control of them, he was not shocked, because he believed that the events that took place at Lagos were not the Avengers' fault. Steve had repeated his story to the authorities several times, but they did not seem to believe him. The authorities still abjured what had happened to the malfunction of Wanda's powers. "No, Wanda saved the lives of the innocent people, and also my life," Steve had told them. But they were not having it. Steve decided that he could not let the Avengers become a governmental machine, as they would become mere puppets and would be blinded by mere vendetta. Rogers voted on his thoughts, and Tony Stark surprisingly disagreed. Steve Rogers' surprise was specified when Tony said it was better to have the United Nations create an organization that would monitor them, as he felt guilty for the mass deaths that happened at Sokovia, and he believed that the Avengers should take more responsibility for their actions. Rogers was not having any of it, and Ross told him that refusing to sign the accords would mean resignation. Moments after that, Captain America had gotten news of Peggy's death, and here he was at her funeral. Steve was shocked when he discovered that Sharon Carter was Peggy's great niece, and when she delivered her eulogy, it solidified Steve's beliefs, because she stated that one should never back down from what they believed in. Steve Rogers decided there and then that he was not backing down. Tony had been on rough rides before, and he considered himself a veteran, but the current predicament he was passing through dwarfed all of the other challenges he had faced. Tony had gone to sign the Sokovia Accords along with some of the Avengers when a bomb exploded and killed the king of Wakanda. The perpetrator had been deduced to be Bucky, the Winter Soldier. Tony had laid back because he did not want to attract more heat to the Avengers, but the information he got was that Steve, Wilson, and T'Challa, the son of the late king of Wakanda, had gone to capture Bucky. Thankfully, Rhodes, the War Machine, had stopped and captured all of them. Now, Tony had heard more shocking news. Captain America had escaped with Bucky, and currently he had recruited Wanda, Hawkeye, Wilson, and someone called the Ant-Man. Tony immediately knew that he had to do something before the heat blew back on the Avengers. Tony immediately went out to seek permission from Ross to take the remaining Avengers with him to capture and bring back Tony and his allies. Tony got the permission, and he recruited Vision, War Machine, Black Widow, and T'Challa, the Black Panther. Tony still felt undermined, so he arranged traveling plans to go and recruit one more person. This would be very interesting, Tony said, as he departed. Steve Rogers knew that the other Avengers would think that he was a traitor, but they did not know what Steve knew. Steve knew that Bucky was innocent. It had all been Zemo who had planned it all along. Zemo had framed Bucky for the explosion that killed the king of Wakanda. Steve was still in the dark about Zemo's motive, but he wanted to find out badly. After Zemo had set Bucky off, which led to their prison break, Steve had tried to calm him down and got the location that Zemo was heading to next. Bucky told him that Zemo was going to activate all of the other Winter Soldiers, and Steve did not fancy the idea. Steve knew the damage that one Winter Soldier could do was enormous, and the thought of having multiple Winter Soldiers on the loose gave him chills. Captain America immediately recruited some Avengers, and they helped in breaking Wanda out of her cell. Steve had almost signed the Accords, but when he heard that Wanda was currently in captivity, he immediately changed his mind. On his team were Hawkeye, Falcon, Wanda, and Ant-Man. Steve Rogers hoped that they would be enough to withstand anything the government threw at them, because he knew that they were traitors in the public light, and Steve Rogers did not blame them. Rogers quickly said a prayer as he moved out to the airport with his crew. Peter Parker entered his house, and he was surprised at the scene before him. Almost like the original timeline, Tony Stark was seated casually at Aunt May's house. Iron Man in my house, Peter asked himself, as he could still not recover from the shock. It did not seem possible to Peter that one of the Avengers, and also his hero, was in the same space with him. Tony Stark cleared his throat to break the awkward silence, and he introduced himself, even though it was still pointless, as Peter had knew almost everything about him. Tony went on to tell Peter that he knew about his secret identity, and it shocked Peter even more. What I don't understand, though, is why you do the thing you do, Tony Stark asked Peter. Peter smiled, and he remembered just thinking about the reason he became Spider-Man before he came home. Peter told Tony Stark exactly what he had told himself then. I understand the price of not doing the right thing, Peter said. And Tony heard the pain in his voice. Tony looked at Peter as he considered what to do. Peter was a child, and he was also a wild card. But Tony felt like he needed him on his team. Tony still felt that he had less manpower than Captain America, and that's why he needed Spider-Man on his team. Tony Stark briefly narrated to Spider-Man his ordeal, and unsurprisingly, Peter was more than eager to jump into action. Stark immediately arranged for his transport details, and within moments, Spider-Man would be on his way to combat Captain America and his team. Tony could not wait to see the look on Peter's face when he saw the new Spider-Man suit he created for him. Spider-Man landed at the airport, and he immediately went into action. They had received info that Steve Rogers would be using the Hull airport to escape via a chopper. Tony Stark's team immediately cut them off, and the fight began almost immediately. Tony Stark was marveled at Peter's powers and quick reflexes as he went up against a giant Ant-Man. Peter was now calling himself Spider-Man, and it pleased Tony that he had finally accepted the name. The fight was almost like a blur for Spider-Man, and even in the end, Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes escaped, with most of the team incapacitated. Tony was pleased with Peter's performance, and he sent him back on a plane, back to Queens. Tony knew that there was something about the whole situation that seemed fishy, and he wanted to get to the bottom of it. Tony decided that he would go and meet Wilson for answers, and he immediately acted upon it. Once Tony had met Wilson and promised that he was on Captain America's side, he got the full story from him, and also the destination of their chopper. They were heading towards an island to stop Zemo from waking up the other Winter Soldiers. Tony Stark got to confirm that his gut feeling was right all along. Zemo was the one responsible for the death of King T'Chaka, and he framed Bucky for it. Tony immediately set out to stop Zemo from carrying his plans, and to also aid Captain America and also Bucky. Tony did not know that Black Panther also followed him from afar. The Prince of Wakanda still had vengeance on his mind. Peter was feeling downcasted. He felt that he had failed Tony Stark, and he hoped he could make up for that. Peter was currently on his way to the airport where Tony had assigned a plane to take him back to Queens. As Peter made his way, he was immediately pulled out of his thoughts, as his spider sense went haywire. Peter quickly leaped out of the way, and thankfully so, as the place he stood before him was turned to rubble. Peter rolled away to put some distance between him and his attacker so that he could get an idea of what he looked like. Peter was scared of what he saw, a black massive monster. Peter suddenly remembered all the strange sightings of a black gooey monster that had been reported in the news. Peter had written them off, but what he saw now was too real to be written off. "So, you want to dance, big man?" Spider-Man called out to the monster, confidently, even though he was quivering inside. "We are Venom, and you, Peter Parker, will be my new host." Venom snarled as he lunged at Spider-Man. Spider-Man quickly leaped out of the way and kicked Venom's face on his way out. Venom was having none of it though, as he too had quick reflexes, even for someone with his size, and caught Peter by his ankle. "Yes, I got you now," Venom hissed as he started transferring himself from his former host to Peter. Everything suddenly went dark for Parker. Peter could see events that he had never seen before. Somebody named Eddie Brock. Events of Riot, a creature that he knew nothing about. But Peter could also see something else. He could see a goblin-like creature flying in the distance, sacrificing himself for Peter Parker. He could also see other events that had never transpired, like Spider-Man throwing a pumpkin bomb at the character. Venom was glad that he had gotten a new host, because the old one had become incompatible with him. "Finally, Peter Parker is mine," Venom hissed as he laughed. The merging process was finally complete, and Peter Parker was gaining back consciousness. When Peter Parker finally awoke, he went into panic mode, but Venom calmed him down. Venom showed him all of his memories and his origin. Venom also explained to Peter Parker how he was sucked in from his universe into Peter's without any warning. Parker could see the mental images being projected into his mind, and he had empathy for Venom. Peter saw Venom and a man, who he had somehow knew was Eddie, saving a woman from robbers. The robbers did not stand a chance as Venom cleared all of them, and their bullets had no effects on him because he just healed them rapidly. Suddenly, it was as if there was a tear in space, and an explosion came out of the tear and wiped out everyone within the alleyway. Peter slightly noticed that one of Venom's weaknesses was fire. Peter saw how most of Venom was destroyed, along with Eddie, but some parts of him that miraculously survived crawled to the tear in space and entered it. The mental projection suddenly finished, and Peter was left with mixed emotions. After thinking about it, Peter decided that the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages, and from what he saw, Venom was a good person. Peter saw it as an answer to his prayers, as he wanted to prove himself to Tony Stark. Parker saw it as an opportunity to redeem himself, and he had an idea on how to do it. He quickly formed into Venom and made his way into the facility where the imprisoned Avengers were held. As Spider-Man entered the facility, alarms started to blare, and they licked their lips. This would be fun, they said in an uneasy tone. Peter was on cloud 9. Him and the Venom symbiote made a formidable team, and they cleared through the guards like they were dolls. Venom had gotten the information from Wilson after much needed persuasion, and they immediately left to go after Tony Stark. Peter hoped that he was not too late, as he arrived via one of Stark's hyperspeed planes, but what he saw shocked him. Wilson had told Peter that Zemo was the problem of the Avengers all along, and he had told Tony the same thing, but what Peter saw marveled him. Tony was currently on the floor with Captain America, standing over him. Peter also noticed that Bucky, the Winter Soldier, was missing an arm. Peter was too shocked to react until Venom brought him back to reality. Peter quickly made up his mind and leaped in beside Iron Man. Tony was startled, seeing a black monster beside him. Then Venom readied himself to showcase Peter's face. "Spider-Man," Tony said in shock. "No, it's Venom now," Peter said with a grin. Captain America was startled and he rolled backwards to examine his new threat. He and Bucky were also startled, but they quickly regained their stance and charged at Venom. Captain America quickly recognized the monster from the news reports and deduced that it was the monster that killed the Wakandan medical outreaching personnels. "You will pay for what you have done to the Avengers," Captain America said, as he threw his shield towards Venom. The shield went with enough force to knock someone out, but Venom just swiped it from the air with ease, like it was a Febreze. Bucky, who was now one-handed, charged madly at Venom with a combat knife. Venom tried to punch him, but he dodged it and struck Venom at his chest. Bucky knew that he should have struck a critical part in Venom that should have incapacitated him, but nothing happened. The gash that Bucky had created simply closed up, and Venom grinned. Venom suddenly turned around and bashed Bucky's head with Captain America's shield. Bucky slammed into a wall and did not move. Captain America used this as an opportunity, and Bucky advanced on him, but Venom was faster. Venom shot out webs from his wrists, and it engulfed Captain America, which totally incapacitated him. Spider-Man quickly removed Tony Stark from his disabled suit, and both of them looked around and surveyed the scene. Tony immediately rushed towards Bucky with a killing intent in his eyes, but Peter quickly knew something was up, and he cut him off. After several moments, Peter succeeded in calming Tony down, and Stark told him everything, including how Zemo planned to put the Avengers against each other, and how Bucky murdered his parents. "Revenge is never the answer," Peter told Stark, even though Venom strongly disagreed. Suddenly, they heard a gunshot, and they ran out to check it out, and they discovered that Black Panther, who had been trailing them, stopped Zemo from committing suicide. Tony Stark decided that if T'Challa could forgive Zemo, then he could try and forgive Bucky. T'Challa immediately called on his ship and left for Wakanda with Bucky and Captain America, while he left Zemo with Tony Stark and Peter. When Tony Stark and Peter arrived at the Avengers headquarters, Zemo was handed over to the authorities. Tony Stark had a long and rigorous thought, and he decided that even though he wanted the Avengers to take more responsibility for their actions, he decided that putting them under the government was not the right way to do things, and he broke them all out with a little help of Spider-Man, the newest Avenger. The name Venom sounded cheesy to Tony. He hoped that Peter would keep the name Spider-Man. Tony had been studying the symbiote, and he had not found anything wrong with it. Tony was simply amazed, and a new idea of a symbiotic suit had immediately popped into his mind. Tony had already started working on it. The symbiote was very powerful, and it could be extremely dangerous in the wrong hands, but Tony knew that Peter had the safest pair of hands in the world. But Tony had already created a contingency plan if anything had happened. Until then, I'll be watching, Tony said, as he tapped his screen, which showed Venom swinging through the city of Queens. Peter was having the best time of his entire life. Peter walked with a spring in his step, as he had been looking forward to this day for months. Tony Stark had informed Parker that would be compatible with Venom. Peter could not wait to try it on, as he was practically running to Stark Industries headquarters. Peter had gotten a job as an intern, but it was all a cover-up for his superhero duties. As Peter made his way to Stark's building, he could not help but reminisce about all that had happened to him in such a short period of time. So much had changed, he muttered to himself. Immediately after the war between Tony and Captain America, Peter had been introduced as an Avenger to the world. Peter had insisted that he be introduced as Venom, but Tony decided that it would be too cheesy, and that he should call himself Spider-Man instead. The people had gotten to love him instantly. Even J. Jonah Jameson's mouth had been closed shut. What about me? Venom asked in Peter's mind. Sometimes Peter forgot that Venom could still do that. Read his thoughts. Venom was right though. Their bond had really grown stronger. Venom had gotten to know Peter's preferences much better, and it reflected in their outward appearance. When they transformed, they now took on a more streamlined body structure, as opposed to the bulky and muscular form that Venom formerly looked. Peter also found out that he was much faster and stronger. When they transformed too, Peter could develop spikes and sharp pointy things from his fingers, and other parts of his body, even though Venom told him that it was not a new thing. Peter was just grateful for Venom, but the only downside was that he became much more of a loner, and he also quit the school's decathlon team. Ned, his best friend, was now very distant because Peter hardly ever had time for him because of his new superhero duties. Peter also struggled to keep Venom in line. Venom always wanted to eat the brains of any humans they encountered. Peter could not count how many times he had to say no to Venom for eating Aunt May's brains. Peter felt that he could not hold him any longer from killing and eating bad guys, until he had discovered chocolate. Peter started consuming large amounts of chocolate, and this did not help his current stand with Aunt May, who thought he was losing it as he kept talking to himself. The chocolates had worked for a while, but now Venom was tired of them. The picture of them almost eating up a bandit was still fresh in Peter's mind. It was at that point that Peter had decided that he needed help. It had taken all of his willpower to stop Venom from biting off the bandit's head. Peter finally told Tony, and fortunately, he had a solution. Tony Stark had deduced Venom needed phleanthamine to survive, since his body did not provide an adequate supply of it. Tony had quickly assured Peter's fears by telling him that he was already working on a symbiotic nanotech suit for him, and that was what he was going to try out today. Peter finally arrived at Stark headquarters, and he heaved a sign of marvel. Going to the headquarters countless times had done nothing to subtract the awe Peter felt for the place. With a prayer that everything would turn out well, Peter went inside the facility. Everything went well, very well. Tony Stark was proud of his intellect, as he had started creating a new suit that would be compatible with Peter and Venom once he had received a sample. And one of them was the phleanthamine deficiency. Tony knew that the chocolate could do something, but further testing proved that Venom would at some point need to consume brains. Tony became very suspicious of Peter after that discovery, and he closely monitored him. Tony, through a fly drone, and some street cameras, which had been hacked to always keep an eye on Parker, saw when he wanted to eat the bandit's head, he had almost taken action. Thankfully, Peter had stopped Venom at the last moment and reported his issue to him immediately. Tony then revealed to him that the new Spider-Man suit he was creating, the suit would solve Venom's problem, as Tony Stark, using the regenerative powers of Venom, added an unfinishing supply of chemicals into the suit. Tony Stark had not told Peter this, but he had been creating an Iron Man suit too, from the symbiote as well as other suits. Tony had been obsessed with the many possibilities that the symbiote properties possessed. It could be the cure for cancer and other terminal diseases he had thought about. The only issue that the symbiote had was compatibility, and Tony was working on breaking the barrier. Tony had also discovered that the symbiote could reproduce, and when it did, the offsprings were much stronger, and then compatibility issues were decreased. Several jars of symbiote filled Tony's lab, and several failed symbiote suits too. "I better dispose of you," Tony said, as he looked at the failed symbiotic suits. The symbiotes used in creating them were too aggressive, and Tony could not have that. "Jarvis, start the test run for specimen 106, please," Tony said to his AI. Jarvis carried out the test run, and Tony could see the actual process via Hall projections. After a lot of suspense, the test run came out as 12% chance of success and survival, and Tony cursed under his breath. "Stay positive," he muttered under his breath. Looking at the bright side, at least Peter's suit was a huge success, Tony said to himself. Clearing his mind of the failed cure for cancer, the test run, Tony comforted himself in the fact that Peter's suit turned out alright. Tony was proud of the kid, and he was glad that he invited him into the Avengers, but lately, he was very cautious. Peter had started acting overconfident, and Tony knew firsthand the effect it could have on a hero. As Stark thought about it, he was more than happy that he had to put some necessary security measures in Peter's suit. Peter did not think his life could get any better, but it did. It certainly did. The suit was awesome, and Venom loved every bit of it. The only downside was the pain that Peter felt during the testing process. Peter had put on the suit, and Venom had merged with it. Almost instantly, Peter felt like all his cells were on fire, and the nanobots entered into his bloodstream. Along with Venom, it merged with him. When the process was done, Peter could immediately tell that it was worth the pain. When Peter summoned Venom's suit, it covered his former Spider-Man suit, with its logo and all. Peter also discovered that Tony had added new tech with the help of Venom's symbiotic properties that allowed him to literally walk on buildings, opposed to the former wall crawling. The suit was pretty awesome, and Peter felt stronger than ever. Venom was no longer nagging about not eating brains because of the solution that Tony added, and it was good too to be true for Peter Parker. "Hey, I don't nag," Venom said in mocking anger. "Yes you do," Peter replied. "No I don't." Peter signed as he knew that it was pointless arguing with Venom. "I don't think anything can spoil my day," Peter thought. And then he quickly regretted it as he hoped that he had not just jinxed his luck. "I don't believe in anything like that," Venom retorted. Peter signed again as he quickly cleared all of his thoughts as he realized that he was going to be late for dinner. Peter did a little run-up, then he leaped off the side of a building he was currently on. Peter immediately transformed into the Venom symbiote midair, and he shot a web out which caught onto another story building. Within a few moments, a very happy Peter was swinging through the city on his way home. Peter quickly snuck through the room in his window, and the Venom symbiote withdrew from him, revealing his body. "It is good to be home," Peter said. As Peter turned around, he discovered that his best friend was at his back the whole time, watching him with his mouth agape. Maybe there is something like jinxing your good luck after all, Venom said, in mocking laughter. Shut up, Peter said out loud in response to Venom. But Ned thought that it was directed to him. I'm sorry, please don't kill me, Ned said as he raised his two hands above his head. No, I didn't mean it like that, Ned, Peter said, as he signed in frustration. Ned quickly got over his surprise and started bombarding Peter with questions about how he got his powers and why he didn't tell him sooner. Ned also deduced that the powers were obvious, what had promoted Peter's recent strange behaviors at school. Him quitting the decathlon team and distancing himself from Ned. Peter calmed Ned down after many trials and promised to answer his questions, only if he promised not to tell no one. Ned quickly agreed and Peter started to spill. You might want to sit down and brace tight for this one, Peter told Ned, before he started narrating his story from the beginning. Ned had not yet recovered from the shock. What made it worse was when Peter revealed Venom to him. Venom had told Ned that he looked like his brains would have tasted delicious, but he was not into eating brains anymore. Venom's statement had not necessarily made Ned uncomfortable, or better. Peter knew that it was a lot to process for Ned, and he had given him a lot of time to think about it. Ned had really thought about it, but now, he felt more amazed than shocked. His best friend was Spider-Man. Ned only wished that he could tell other people that his best friend was Spider-Man, or now, the black-suited Spider-Man. But unfortunately, he couldn't. Peter had sworn to him to secrecy, even though he did not understand why. If Ned was Venom, he would have let everyone know. Ned had to let it slip during their gym time that Peter knew Venom, and now they got invited to Liz's party. Liz was Peter's longtime crush, and Ned hoped that Peter Parker would be able to summon courage and at least talk to her. Ned had given Peter a solution on how to get her to date him, but quickly discarded it. He told Peter to tell Liz his secret identity, but Parker was having none of it. Just look at how your connection to Venom got us a party invitation. Ned had argued, and even Venom seemed to concur with him. Venom thought he was too awesome to be kept hidden. Peter just swatted aside the idea and paid them no mind, and Ned quickly let the topic die. I am best friends with Venom, Ned muttered with a boyish grin as he prepared to go out for the party. Peter Parker acted like the decision to reveal his identity to Liz had not tempted him to, and Ned, but he could not hide anything from Venom, who had been tormenting him since they left school. For the umpteenth time, I'm not going to do it, Peter screamed, as Aunt May walked out of the living room with a concerned look on her face. Peter sighed as he knew the scenario would not help calm down Aunt May's suspicions. The innocent also seemed to calm down Venom. Peter felt very tired of the whole situation and decided to clear his head, and he knew just the thing to cheer him up. Within a few minutes, Parker was swinging through the city of Queens, patrolling the city for any criminal activity. The crime rate of Queens had drastically reduced, particularly after Venom almost ate the bandit. Peter deduced that the bandit had shared his tales with the crime underworld, and they were all scared of him. Peter Parker had been swinging through the city, and he had only stopped 3 petty robberies, and he was bored. Peter wanted to try out his new suit, wanted to test out the limits. Suddenly, Peter saw a bright light shining, and he secretly hoped it was a crime scene. His hopes were true. It was a crime scene. It had taken Peter some time to get to the scene because there was no buildings to swing by. Spider-Man quickly improvised and leaped through the trees. Peter saw men trading what he discovered were Jatari weapons behind the back of a van with a gangster. Peter knew that they were Jatari weapons because of his time spent at Stark Labs. Finally, Venom smiled as they prepared to attack. Suddenly, Peter's phone rang as Ned was trying to call him for the party. The sound quickly got the attention of the arms dealers, and they became guarded. Venom decided that it was time to strike, and without wasting a second, he did. There were no match for Venom as he tore through their ranks. Venom had the element of surprise, and he went first for the gangsters. Venom leaped and gave him a roundhouse kick, knocking him out cold. Venom then turned his attention to the other dealers of the arms. He planted a kick on one's chest and sent him flying into the van. Venom's spidey sense quickly alerted him, and he jumped out of the way as one of the dealers fired an energy beam from one of the Jatari weapons. Spider-Man dodged the beam easily, and he landed in front of the shooter and morphed his hand into a blade and slashed the gun while he punched the holder, who crumbled on the floor. As Venom went to retrieve the other dealer from the van, his spidey sense went haywire, but he was not fast enough. The dealer, who was called the Shocker, punched Venom with a Jatari gauntlet, and its electrical powers blasted Venom into a tree. Peter was dazed, but not for long. When he got back his senses, he discovered that the dealers had entered the van and they were fleeing. Venom immediately webbed the gangsters to the tree to ensure they didn't escape, and he ran after the Jatari weapons dealer's van. There were still no high buildings to provide leverage for Spider-Man to swing, but he improvised and started chasing after the van. Peter was once again thankful for Venom, as the symbiote provided him with extreme speed and unlimited stamina. The weapon dealers saw Venom gaining on them, and one of them, who blasted Venom to a tree, started shooting him with an Ultron blaster gun. Venom's reflexes were fast, and he dodged all of the shots. The Shocker was getting desperate, and he threw the gun at Venom. Venom slapped it out of his sight as it exploded when it impacted a building. But Venom did not care. He was rageful. The Shocker had thrown the weapon at Venom as a distraction, and without giving Venom a chance to react, he threw a grenade at him. The grenade exploded on Venom's body, and it blew him apart. The Shocker gave a shout of joy as the van kept on driving. The dealers both thanked the universe for their lives after the close encounter with Spider-Man. When they noticed a shadowy figure flying above them, it was their boss, the Vulture, and Bryce. The Shocker was surprised by his appearance. "I had already phoned the boss, Herman Schultz," told the Shocker. Jackson Bryce, who was immediately furious. "I had it under control," he said, when suddenly they felt a weight land on their van, and within a split second, the van was capsized and thrown to a story building. The result was devastating as the van exploded with all of the Jatari weapons in it, which caused a massive explosion that affected most of the buildings around it. Venom stood, heaving in anger. Their grenade had almost killed him, if not for Venom's healing properties and Tony Stark's suit, which offered some protection of fire to Venom. As soon as he started regenerating, Venom had made off in pursuit of the van, and he had already been the one who had thrown it to the building. "No!" a voice above wailed, and Venom saw a winged creature circling the sky. The creature quickly took off, and Venom followed in pursuit. None of you are getting away, Peter and Venom decided, as they figured that this was the most fun they had had fighting crime since the Avengers Civil War. Spider-Man and Vulture wreaked havoc in the town. The pursuit had been going on for a while now, and the town was bearing the brunt of it. Venom had not been able to catch Vulture, but the chaos gave him thrills. Vulture had been shooting plasma beams at Venom, but he easily dodged all of them. Peter Parker knew he had to find a way to capture Vulture, as even he was getting tired, and suddenly he had an idea. Venom knew webbing Vulture wouldn't work, as he had tried it and failed severely, so he tried another plan. Peter Parker was approaching two huge buildings. They were opposite of each other, and he shot out one web from his wrist, while he ran backwards, stretched and leaped. This action resulted in a huge leap, and Venom landed on a very startled Vulture. When Venom landed, he wasted no time as he cut off his wings, and this made Vulture crash, fortunately, into a river that was below them. Venom did a backflip and landed by the bank of the river. "It is finished," Venom hissed. Suddenly, Tony Stark arrived as Iron Man, and Venom was glad to see him, as he expected approval and praise from him, but he got the exact opposite. Iron Man showed him how his reckless actions had caused multiple tragedies in the city, and how he had put multiple lives at risk. Fortunately, nobody is dead, but there are severe injuries. Tony barked at Peter. Tony told Peter that he was not ready to be an Avenger, and that he was going to take the suit away from him, along with Venom. "That's impossible," Peter said. "No, it's not. I added in a feature in the suit. I can lock up Venom and the suit within you with just a command," Tony said as he gave the command. Peter's life was miserable. Venom had been silent since Tony gave the command. Peter still felt Venom's presence, but it was as if a wall had literally been placed between the two. The only person that comforted him was Ned. Tony had also released a statement to the public that stated that Spider-Man was no longer an Avenger, and it broke Peter Parker, as he could not even go out on the streets again as Spider-Man. Worst of all, Vulture's body was not found. Ned convened Peter to go out to the homecoming dance, as it would help him take his mind off things, and Ned had miraculously set up a date with Liz. As Peter stepped out of his house, he sincerely hoped that the day would go as perfectly as he thought, but he had sadness within himself, as he knew that Venom would probably have a retort to that. Peter's night had gone nothing like planned. Peter had discovered that Toombs, Liz's father, was actually Vulture, via the family portrait. Peter had then sneaked into Toombs' personal study. When he discovered his plans, he was shocked. Liz had told Parker that her father had no love for Venom after the day of the bombing, because the fire destroyed his business, and now everything made sense to Peter. From what Peter saw, after thwarting Vulture's plans and destroying most of his Jatari weapons, he had received info of awesome and deadly symbiotic suits at Stark Labs. Peter saw the plans Toombs had done to steal the suits, and he knew it would work. The plan was ingenious. Parker knew he had to do something, so he ditched Liz and donned his homemade Spider-Man suit to go and thwart Toombs' plans. He didn't go there as Venom, but he went there as Spider-Man. Peter tried calling Tony, but it went straight to voicemail. But he told himself everything nonetheless as he made his way to the facility. Spider-Man was too late. Toombs had gotten the suit, and now he wore one. "I am Carnage," he shouted, as he finished merging with one of the symbiotic suits. The suit then created large knives that formed wings, and Toombs smirked. "That's more like it," he said. Carnage quickly lunged at Spider-Man, and Peter did not stand a chance. This was Vulture, bonded with the Carnage symbiote. Within minutes, Peter laid sprawled on the floor. Toombs went to unmask Spider-Man, when suddenly Venom had emerged. Peter felt the barrier between him and Venom break, and deduced that Tony must have finally heard his message, and he unlocked Venom in his suit. Parker quickly kicked Carnage's legs from under him and got to his feet. You will pay for all you have done," Toombs screamed at Venom, as he realized that he was truly Spider-Man. Vulture, or Carnage now, leaped and flew straight at Venom as he braced for impact, but the hit never came. Instead, Venom heard the screams of pain. What Peter saw was a freak show, even by Venom's standards, as it looked as if the suit was literally consuming Toombs. Only later did Peter find out that what had happened was the suit not being compatible with Toombs' body. After some agonizing seconds, Toombs' body exploded, and he died. Peter was currently on top of his Queens high school building, and he was doing some deep reflection. It had been 2 weeks after the incident with Carnage, and everything was sort of back to normal. Liz and her mom had moved from Queens to distance themselves from the grief, and Peter's heart had shattered when she told him. Tony had forgiven Peter, but he stated that he judged Peter too early, and that he would have to work his way back into the Avengers. Peter didn't mind that. In fact, Peter preferred it as he wanted to focus more on himself and try and become a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I don't like the term friendly, but I'll try it, Venom said reluctantly. Peter laughed as his separation from Venom made him appreciate the relationship, and he grew more fonder of the symbiote. Let's go and save some people, Peter said, as Venom emerged and suited up. Together, they swung through the city. Bruce Banner was still traumatized, and his facial expressions displayed it. Bruce had just told everything to Doctor Strange and Wong about Thanos' invasion, and he could tell that they were scared, as they should be. Bruce had witnessed the powers of Thanos firsthand, and he knew that it was not a joke, as Thanos had literally manhandled the Hulk, and nobody had ever done that before. Strange immediately contacted Tony Stark, and Tony arrived rapidly. They told Tony what had happened, and Bruce did not leave anything out. Bruce told Tony exactly the same thing he had told Doctor Strange and Wong, and Tony's facial expression turned grim. He killed Loki, Bruce exclaimed at Tony, and went on to tell him how he defeated Thor and destroyed half of the Asgardians and their spaceship. It was Heimdall that had used the Bifrost to save the Hulk, and he did not leave the piece of information out. Bruce immediately requested that Steve Rogers be contacted, as they would need all hands on deck to face the Mad Titan. They all deduced that since Thanos destroyed the Asgardians for the Power Stone, that he would be coming to Earth to get the Mind Stone from Vision and the Time Stone from Dr. Stephen Strange. Tony also filled in Bruce on what had happened in his absence, about the war he had been with Steve Rogers, and about how he was in no state of mind to really communicate with him. But Bruce Banner was having none of it. Thanos is by far the greatest threat we have ever faced, Bruce pointed out, as he drew them to the fact that Loki was just Thanos' errand boy. Tony Stark seemed to get the message and decided to contact Steve. After the war, even though Iron Man now sided with Steve Rogers about not signing the Accords, they still had some bad blood between them. Because of Bucky's case, Steve had sent out a phone call with his emergency line to Tony in case he needed to contact him. Tony had sworn that he would never contact Steve, but yet for some reason he carried the phone with him wherever he went. Tony decided that it was time to put their bad blood aside for the greater good of the world, and decided to call Captain America. And that was exactly the moment that the invasion started. A spaceship arrived, and it contained two adopted children of Thanos, Ebony Maw and Call Obsidian, and they were here for the Time Stone. Tony took one good look at them and knew that they needed enough manpower, but fortunately enough, they had the Hulk, or so Stark had thought. Bruce Banner tried to transform multiple times, but the Hulk would not emerge. Bruce stated that the Hulk was scared and Tony was genuinely afraid of Thanos for the first time. Someone who could make the Hulk scared of a fight has to be extremely powerful, Tony thought. Doctor Strange and Wong immediately went into battle, and Tony flew in along to help, but it was not looking good. The two beings were incredibly powerful, and they barely could withstand them. Tony Stark did not believe in miracles, but now he sincerely hoped for one. Peter Parker was having a swell time with Ned on the bus when he saw it, the spaceship. Peter immediately knew that something was wrong, and Venom, who hardly ever agreed with him, thought so too. I wonder why we can never just sit back and relax though, Venom hissed, and Peter could not agree less. Whenever Peter wanted to take a break, or while he was on a break, that was when the dangerous threats seemed to occur, but he could not complain because he was the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Peter immediately told Ned to cause a distraction so that he could go and check out the danger. And Ned did the obvious thing. Ned just pointed out the alien spaceship to everyone, and their attention was immediately fixed on it. Parker swung out and escaped with none of them noticing, and started heading in the direction of the ship, even as Venom merged with him. By the time Parker had run up the first building to get a good view, he was already clouded in by a black and silky Venom suit. Peter had seen a lot of alien movies, but all that he could not prepare himself for the scene that he was currently witnessing. Parker saw two scary looking like aliens battling Strange, Wong, and Iron Man. Peter Parker was not sure at first that it was Tony because he was flying very fast, and all Peter saw was a streak of red, but now Parker could see him clearly, and he was in imminent danger, as Ebony Maw lifted a light pole to strike him. Parker knew that it was his cue to jump into battle, and he did so as he landed in front of Tony and morphed his hand into a blade, and cut the pole that was about to crush Stark. Both Tony and Ebony Maw were surprised to see him, with the latter more irritated than surprised. "Parker," Tony asked, requesting to know how he had gotten here. Peter quickly explained that he was in the neighborhood, and he asked Tony what the situation was, and Stark quickly filled him in. From what Stark said, Peter could deduce that they really needed to protect Doctor Strange, and he put his mind into it. Thankfully, Wong was taking care of Obsidian, so Parker and Stark could focus on Ebony Maw. Letting out a battle cry, Venom lunged at Ebony Maw, and that was his mistake as a portal suddenly appeared in front of him, and Parker could not change his course in time. Venom entered the portal and quickly materialized and slammed into a building. Peter quickly recovered, but when he did, the battle was going very badly for Stark and his allies. Wong had succeeded in disposing of Obsidian, but Ebony Maw had captured Doctor Strange, and he was currently fleeing his spaceship. Venom could not let that happen. Spider-Man quickly did a run-through and shot out a web to the ship, and he did not miss. Venom quickly made his way up to the ship. Parker wanted to quickly cut off its wings, but Peter stopped him as he pointed out that there was innocent civilians below them. "So what do you suggest we do, Smarty Pants?" Venom asked. Peter quickly thought about it and decided a course of action. Even as Tony Stark flew to join them, Peter decided that he better initiate his plan fast, as they were soon going to leave the Earth. Peter quickly did a backflip and landed on the windshield of the ship. Venom landed on the windshield with so much force that it was accompanied by the spikes that he formed in midair, that it shattered, and Peter was in the ship. Ebony Maw was invoked out cold by his entrance. Maw just saw a black mass coming towards him, and he could do nothing to stop it. As he got the full impact, the ship started flashing warning lights as it blared its alarms, as Venom's entrance had caused immense damage to it. The ship started free-falling, and within minutes it would crash into the city below, and lots of lives would be lost. Peter started to think of what they could do to avert the disaster, but Doctor Strange told him not to worry about it. "Just leave the ship, I'll take care of it," Strange said. Peter was still doubtful of how Strange would take care of it, but he figured out that if Tony trusted him, he should as well. Venom nodded to Strange and jumped out of the ship, where he saw Iron Man beneath, trying to slow its descent with his thrusters. Suddenly a portal materialized beneath them, and Peter now understood what Doctor Strange had meant when he saw he would take care of it. Strange wanted to teleport the ship to another location, devoiding of human life, and to avoid mass casualties. Parker quickly drew Tony's attention to the portal, and he detached himself from under the ship and flew above it. Peter knew that he could not go down with the ship, and so he did the responsible thing. Parker jumped off of the ship. Then he remembered that he could not fly, and suddenly, Peter started screaming as the ground was closing in rapidly on him. Tony Stark almost laughed out his guts when Peter started waving his arms like a bird, trying to stay airborne. Tony had already installed a feature to help Peter with flying, and he was sure that Venom knew about it. Tony deduced that Venom also found Peter's acts hilarious, and that's why he did not tell him about the information earlier to Peter. And Stark could not blame him. Ebony Maw's ship entered the portal that Doctor Strange had created, and it immediately closed. The ground drew nearby by the second, and Peter still seemed in the dark, and Tony decided to put an end to Venom's act. Tony knew that even if Peter actually impacted on the ground and became a smear of blood and bones, he would still regenerate as Venom, and he would be cured. But Tony was not a fan of seeing people's insides splatter on the ground, and he knew that Peter was not too, especially when it was his own. "Venom," Tony screamed in a chattering voice, and Venom sighed wistfully as Tony Stark had just turned off a comedy show he was watching. Within a few seconds, Peter spread his arms and legs out, and thin fabrics projected from the right places, and Peter started gliding. "This is awesome," Peter exclaimed, and Tony wondered how the kid did it, going from being scared to literal death, and now total awe and joy in a split second. As they approached the ground, Tony saw Doctor Strange already on the ground waiting for them, and his face turned grim as he remembered they had unfinished business. Immediately after they landed safely, Strange had opened another portal, and they all went to interrogate Ebony Maw. Strange had been smart to teleport the ship to Antarctica, as the containment was inhabitable by no humans, Tony thought. The spaceship was utterly destroyed, and Tony started doubting whether Ebony Maw would still be alive when Venom stated that he could smell blood. Peter quickly went to work as he pulled away parts of the ship, like they were mere paper, in search of Ebony Maw, and even though Tony knew that he possessed superhuman strength, he was still amazed. Within minutes, Maw lay sprawled on their feet, and Tony could tell that it would not be long before he died. Doctor Strange went straight into questioning him by asking him who Thanos was and how they could stop him. But Ebony Maw just laughed. After several painful laughs and chuckles, Ebony Maw told them amidst coughing up blood that they were done for. The Mad Titan is coming to get the Infinity Stones, and with them, he will erase half of the population of the universe, and there is nothing any of you can do about it to stop him. Ebony Maw told them, and then he gave up his ghost. The mood of the atmosphere was so grim that even Venom did not dare to make any jokes about how peaceful Ebony Maw looked in his death, for someone who loved war. Bruce Banner was on a mission to save Earth, and he hoped that he would succeed. Bruce had immediately called Rogers and informed him about everything. Banner hoped that he would be able to make the right choice, and to save Vision, as he had a hunch that Thanos had also sent a ship to attack him and retrieve the Mind Stone. Banner was on his way to see the War Machine, and he told Rogers to gather most of the Avengers and meet him there. Bruce was still concerned about his state, as he could still not get the Hulk to come out. Banner had tried everything, but the Green Beast was still adamant on staying inside. Bruce started having doubts as he realized that he might not be useful if they eventually have a war with the Mad Titan. Banner grunted in frustration as he tried to bring out the Hulk, unsuccessfully for the umpteenth time. Rhodes' place was nearby, and Banner cleared his mind of his worried thoughts as he approached his destination. "I hope they got Vision," Bruce said as he walked into Rhodes' location. Rogers had never been more happy to be on time. Steve wondered what would have happened if they had arrived 1 minute later, as Thanos' forces were about overpowering Wanda and getting the Mind Stone from Vision. Captain America, fortunately, had brought back up, and they quickly dismantled and defeated the assailants. Wanda and Vision were very grateful, but Steve Rogers knew that the war was not over, and they had to quickly move onto Rhodes' location. When Bruce Banner told them about Thanos, Steve thought he was joking, but seeing the attack on the lives of Vision and Wanda was enough to prove to him that the Mad Titan did exist. They quickly transported themselves to Rhodes' location, even as Wanda and Vision hoped that Bruce Banner was waiting for them. with a very feasible explanation to the attack that they had just faced, as Rogers' explanation was hasty and did not do justice for their curiosity. When they arrived, they saw the War Machine in a heated conversation with Ross, and from what he heard, Steve was sure that Rhodes was regretting signing the Sokovia Accords, just as he warned. War Machine immediately ended the call once he noticed their presence, much to their annoyance of Ross, and Rogers knew that his actions might mean the end of the government service. Within a few moments, Bruce Banner joined them, and much to the relief of Steve Rogers, as he did not have the answers the others were looking for. Bruce told them everything, and their mood immediately dimmed. Vision volunteered to sacrifice his life and die for them so that they could destroy the Mind Stone and keep it out of Thanos' reach. Wanda's face was full of pure shock and agony, and Steve could not let that happen. Steve finally remembered how Wanda had saved his life from the explosion caused by Crossbones. Rogers decided that he could not let Wanda lose someone that she loved, and he came up with an idea. Captain America advised them to go to Wakanda, as they could safely remove the Mind Stone from Vision's head without having to kill him. Steve knew they could, because they were the country that had the most advanced technology on the Earth. The other team members quickly agreed to this, and when Bruce asked for Ant-Man and Hawkeye, it was revealed to him that they were placed under house arrest by the government. Bruce decided that it was better that they made do with what they had, and they started planning their route as they were heading straight to Wakanda. Peter Quill remembered fondly how his mother had always told him that everything would be alright, that it would be ever better. Peter Quill regretted all of the events of today, from meeting Thor and splitting up with Groot and Rocket Raccoon, and then going to stop Thanos in Nowhere. Peter actually shed a tear as he was in Nowhere, where Gamora was captured. Quill decided that he had to get her back, but he did not know where exactly to go. But the universe, in its own unique way, had solved the problem for Star-Lord. Nebula, Gamora's sister, had escaped from Thanos' ship, and she knew where Thanos was. Apparently, Nebula had bugged the ship, and she deciphered that after Thanos had gotten the Soul Stone, he would go after the Time Stone, which was currently on Earth. Star-Lord wasted no time as he started flying his spaceship down to Earth, his home. Doctor Strange was the first to break the ice. They had been literally quiet since Ebony Maw's statement. "I can sense him coming," Strange said, and without asking, both Peter and Stark knew that it was the Mad Titan. They quickly scrambled and started forming battle plans and strategies. Their best plan so far was for them to run. Doctor Strange, however, paid them no mind, as he was currently looking through the various possible outcomes of the battle. Tony Stark noticed this and asked Doctor Strange how many victories there were. Strange looked grimmer than usual, and he told them the answer. "Only 2, he said. Peter then insisted that they really considered running, but Doctor Strange shook his head. "It had to be here," Doctor Strange said, and Peter deduced that he wanted the fight to take place far away from humanity, but Tony Stark understood. In those two realities, they had won. Maybe the fight had taken place here, Stark thought. As they gathered around to discuss battle strategies, a shadow fell upon them, and they realized it was too late. Thanos had arrived. In the original reality, the battle had taken place on Titan, but in this reality, some of the events are now unfolding differently. The Mad Titan grinned when he saw the 3 of them, as he asked if they were the best Earth had to offer, but they did not reply, and quickly attacked after Strange had asked Thanos why he was doing what he wanted to do. Thanos just casually replied that he was saving the universe by wiping out half of its population, and Venom, alongside Tony Stark, lost it. They quickly lunged themselves at Thanos and attacked. "Insects, that's all they were," Thanos exclaimed in his mind as the fight went on for a long time, much to his distaste. The one giving Thanos the most discomfort was Venom, as he was relentless. No matter what Thanos threw at him, he quickly regenerated and kept on coming back. And it was tiring Thanos out, and the result was the current bleeding slash on his face. Once the Mad Titan had tasted his blood, he had gotten rageful, and he used the Space Stone to teleport Venom to the other side of Antarctica. Well, he had to deal with Tony Stark and Doctor Strange, which were no match for him. Thanos had simply captured Tony and used him for ransom, and Doctor Strange had willingly handed over the Time Stone amidst Tony's screams, which Doctor Strange did not comply with. So predictable, Thanos spat at Doctor Strange, in disgust. By the time Venom had arrived at the battle scene, there was a heated one-side argument going on between Doctor Strange and Tony, but no Thanos. Tony was chewing Strange off for willingly giving up the Time Stone, but Strange did not say a thing. Thanos, with 4 Infinity Stones acquired, quickly transported himself to Wakanda. The battle was going on in full force, but it did not seem to faze the Mad Titan, as he quickly knocked out the people protecting Vision and the Mind Stone, even though Steve Rogers had surprised him by withstanding him for a moment. As Thanos approached the stone, he was then shot at the back by Peter Quill, which Thanos recognized almost immediately. It was all a distraction, and suddenly several Wakandan soldiers dropped on top of him, along with Drax and Mantis. They lured him into sleep. Peter Quill smiled as their plan came into fruition. Now it was just time for them to detach the gauntlet from Thanos' hand. As Quill made his way to remove the gauntlet, along with the other Wakandan soldiers, a mighty roar was heard above. The god of thunder immediately came, crashing down in rage from the sky with Stormbreaker, and he used the momentum and threw the Stormbreaker at Thanos. Thor immediately felt some redemption for the Asgardians Thanos had killed, and for his brother Loki. But it did not last long, because it was an illusion, and Stormbreaker was actually embedded into the Hulk Smasher, which was made by Bruce Banner. Thanos immediately cackled with a mocking laughter that was directed at the Avengers and the people of Wakanda, along with the Guardians of the Galaxy. While they were distracted with illusions, he had gotten the Mind Stone from Vision. Thanos raised his hand and everybody lunged at him, but they were too slow. Thanos snapped his fingers, and half of the universe's population faded. Doctor Strange faded before Tony, and Peter's eyes leaving. Tony's question unanswered. Tony had asked Strange why he gave up the Time Stone to Thanos, because it was really unlike him. As Stark worried about Strange's action, and his imminent fading, he realized that there was greater things to worry about, as Peter was fading too. "Don't let me go, Mr. Stark," Peter pleaded with him, and Tony's heart broke, because he knew he couldn't do anything. Tony quickly knew that Thanos had won the war, and Peter was fading fast. "I'm sorry, Peter. I'm so sorry," Peter said as he faded away, and a teardrop escaped from Tony's eyes, and soon multiple others took its place. After weeping for some time, Tony braced himself and took off to meet the other Avengers, and to get their situation report, as there was nothing left to see where he was. Tony was wrong. Few minutes after Tony left, dust started gathering together. The process had actually started at the atomic level, while Stark was still around, but he could not possibly seen it. After some time, it started taking shape of a young man. When it was done, a surprised Peter had completely reformed. He was unconscious, his body turning black-like. "We survived," Venom announced. The events of the war were hard to believe for Tony Stark, and that was saying something because Tony had seen quite a lot of things. After the Mad Titan had won, he erased half of all the universe's population, and that was heartbreaking for everybody, including Tony Stark. Tony had to admit, he had a small feeling inside of him that thought that Thanos had been bluffing, but when Doctor Strange and Peter faded before his eyes, the feeling also did. Tony had felt anguish like he had never felt before, and he had cried profusely. Then it happened. Peter's revival. Tony had already gone away to meet the survivors of the war when the process had happened, so Tony was oblivious to the event. Stark grimaced as he remembered how the supposed meet and greet with the Avengers was as everyone was mourning. If Tony Stark had not been in the deepest form of anguish possible, then the battle scene would have done it for him. Tony got the situation report from Wakanda's army general, and it was as suspected. They were no match for Thanos. The Mad Titan had completely outsmarted them and gotten the Mind Stone, and now he had escaped to an alien planet to possibly celebrate. Stark remembered how those days had been for him and the world, as he had completely lost hope for anything the world had to offer. All of that changed when Tony got a ring at his door. Tony actually smiled as he still recollected that particular day's events perfectly. Tony had just been tinkering around with the suits, but he could not find the heart to work on the symbiotic suit, as it reminded him of Peter Parker. Stark just worked hoping that it would take his mind off things, but it did not work. Tony asked so many questions about what he would have done differently to change the results of the battle, but he did not find anything, so he blamed Doctor Strange. If Strange had fled with the Time Stone as Stark told him to, then maybe things would have turned out right. Maybe half of the universe's population would still be alive. As Tony buried himself in his depression, work, and thoughts, the doorbell rang. Tony was immediately pulled out of his thoughts, and he became irritated as he did not want visitors for now. The doorbell became consistent, and Tony was forced to stop what he was doing as he requested for a video feed of who was bugging him at his door, and he was immediately shocked. Never in his wildest dreams did Tony expect to see who he was seeing. Peter, Tony asked, as he cleared his eyes to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. How could this be? Tony asked, as he immediately accessed the world's servers to check if everyone that had been erased by the blip had come back, but it came back negative. Stark was quickly astounded, as he did not know how it was possible for Peter to be back. Tony Stark then looked into the camera again, and Peter had vanished. Tony quickly rushed to the front of his door, as he was sure he had seen Peter there. No, he cannot be gone again, Tony said. Tony opened his door, and the front yard was indeed empty. Peter was gone. Tony was completely perplexed, as he did not know what to make of his experience. "Hello, Mr. Stark," Peter said behind Tony's back, and he almost jumped out of his skin because of the fear. Tony immediately jumped and took in the sight of Peter, even as he cautiously walked up to Peter to poke him, in order to make sure that he was not hallucinating. Tony then did a double take by having one of his AI drones scan him, and they confirmed that it was really Peter Parker. Tony then ran up to hug him while asking him how it was possible, and Peter confessed that he also didn't know the answer to that. Tony invited Peter inside for a nice meal and discussion. Once they were relaxed, Tony asked for his story, and Peter spilled. As Peter told Stark his story, he realized that he was lucky to be alive. Peter remembered very vaguely how he had rematerialized, but without any memories. Peter's memories seemed to be very hazy at the time, but they were coming back gradually. Peter was seriously in pain and anguish, but he was also too weak to even scream and cry out as his atoms rematerialized one by one. When Peter had finished rematerializing, he remembered everything, and he was shocked at how he was alive, because he remembered vividly how he faded in front of Iron Man. "Mr. Stark," Peter said as he widely turned around, but he was alone. "Venom, are you there?" Peter asked too. But the umpteenth time, there was still no response, and Peter was very scared. Venom's presence was still in Peter. Peter felt it, but it was very faint, and it did not necessarily make him happy. A lot of theories came into his mind of Peter, and a lot of them were not good. One of his theories was that he was in Thanos' prison, and another was that he miraculously survived the blip, but he quickly discarded the latter. Peter had been a superhero long enough to know that things did not come out good for good people that easily, and then suddenly, Peter heard a voice, a very raspy whisper, as if Venom was trying to say something, but Peter could not make out the words. Another one of Peter's thoughts was that he was in the afterlife. and since he was still in Antarctica, he guessed he did not make it to heaven. But what he saw now gave him hope that maybe he was wrong. Peter saw a woman who was glowing with what was possibly huge amounts of energy coming towards him. And when she landed, Peter asked her the most reasonable question that came to his mind. "Are you an angel?" he said. And the woman didn't even crack a smile. Peter finished his story by telling Tony that the woman told him that she was Captain Marvel, and Nick Fury summoned her. Peter had done his best telling her all the events that had happened to Earth, and the woman had given him a free ride to Tony's house. Tony had certainly gotten a lot to think about from Peter's story, and one of such was how he was still alive. Tony had many theories, but they all bottled down to one thing, or one symbiote in particular, Venom. One of the theories that came to Tony's mind made more sense. It was that because Venom was from another universe, the Infinity Stones did not have much power on him, so he had just used most of his life force to regenerate Peter. Tony immediately ran a checkup on Peter, and he discovered that it was true. Venom's presence was very faint in Peter, as the symbiote had spent almost all its life to rematerialize Peter. What supported this fact was when Tony realized that Venom had used a whole 23 days to heal Peter Parker. Stark immediately told this fact to Peter, and his mood immediately turned sour as he asked whether there was anything Stark could do to save Venom. And Tony had an idea, as he had been working on a project before Thanos' incident. Tony took Peter into a room that contained a pod. Tony called it the reinstatement tank. It was used to fasten the symbiote's healing process that Tony usually experimented on. Peter immediately got the idea, and he helped Tony in clearing it out. When they were done, Peter laid down inside the pod, and Stark closed it and activated it. Tony Stark saw that his theory was right, and Venom was quickly regenerating as he monitored the process from his screen. "Good to have you back, Pete," Tony said as he watched on. While Peter had been rehabilitating, Tony had been contacted by the remaining Avengers. Steve Rogers and him had put aside their differences for the time being, again. In attendance were those that were not wiped out by the blip. Thor, Steve, Natasha, Nebula, Banner, and Captain Marvel, as well as the others. Tony deduced that it was Captain Marvel that saved Peter, but that did not stop Tony from going off on her. Tony questioned why she was not around to fight when the world needed her the most, but their brewing argument was cut off by others. The meeting had been summoned because they wanted to go and capture Thanos and get back the Infinity Stones, which they would use to bring everybody back. The plan was laid out and it seemed like it would work, but some of the Avengers were wary because unexpected things usually happened. After much deliberation on the plan, they decided to go ahead with the plan. Tony held off on telling them that Spider-Man was back, as he did not necessarily want to get their hopes up that erased people would be coming back. Tony decided that when he had all his pieces in the puzzle put back together, he would tell them. After agreeing on the plan, they immediately went to prepare as they planned to leave immediately. The battle was surprisingly short, as Thanos was immediately defeated and brought to his knees. Captain Marvel had been a major factor because she unleashed a huge amount of energy on him through a punch. Once they had subdued the Mad Titan, they requested for the Infinity Stones, and Rogers used the opportunity to look around the environment. From what Steve could tell, Thanos had gotten his hands quite dirty, literally, as he was a farmer now. Steve wondered how a person could wipe out half of the universe and casually go into farming as though nothing had happened. After all the threats, Thanos had just laughed and stated that he had destroyed all of the stones to ensure that they would not be used again, and everyone knew he was telling the truth. Thor immediately got furious and beheaded Thanos, leaving some of the Avengers surprised and rageful as they had just lost the only lead they had. Peter Parker felt miserable. Parker was just coming back from Aunt May's house, and he discovered that she was blipped along with Ned and MJ. Peter felt like Thanos had a very personal vendetta against him, as he did not think that it was random or for nothing. "Cheer up. At least you have me, and I'm quite a lot," Venom snarled. Peter realized that he was right, and he became very grateful again to Tony Stark for the pod. The reinstatement tank had worked perfectly, even though it took some hours, but Venom had been brought back to life fully. Tony had gone over his theories with Parker, and it made a whole lot more sense as he knew that the only reason he survived the blip was Venom. Peter now stayed with Tony, even though the other Avengers did not know yet about it, and he had been helping Tony Stark work on his incredible projects, until he decided to go visit Aunt May and see if she was still alive, or if she faded away. Peter knew that Tony was aware of their condition, but he did not say anything, and he had simply given him the go-ahead, and Parker was grateful. Peter reached his new home, Tony's house, and he went inside as he wondered what the next step would be. Peter had been helping Tony Stark build his new symbiotic suit, and the presence of Venom had quickened the process as he answered some vital questions. It had currently been 6 months since the blip. They were currently in the micro stages as Tony watched them through a quantum advanced microscope, how the cells were being formed in the symbiotic suit as he directed Peter on where and how to position things. Tony noticed how the effects took place, and he noticed a huge difference in the time relevancy. Tony then remembered someone who was called the Ant-Man, and wished he was still around to help him, as that was his particular field. Unfortunately, he had disappeared, and Tony deduced that he was blipped along with half of the population of the universe. Peter, in a moment of great sadness as he remembered what had happened to his friends and the world, asked if they could not just go back in time to correct it. And Tony got a huge idea. It was a far shot, but Tony was not going to give up anytime soon, as he got the motivation from Peter's never-dying attitude. "Peter," Tony said, "I got an idea." He completed as he beamed at the youngster. "Why do I have a feeling that this is crazy?" Venom grieved. And Tony actually laughed after a very long time of sadness. Peter and Venom actually felt that the plan would work. It had to, Peter said, even though Venom warned him not to get his hopes up. Tony had a very crazy idea of time travel, and they were semi-confident that they could pull it off. They had not yet told the other Avengers as they kept formulating their plans and gathering the materials, as Tony told Peter that it would be nice to go to them with the time machines rather than just the ideas. They started working on the machine day and night, and their heart was into it, so they moved fast. Suddenly, they hit a wall in their progress, and Tony knew that he had to bring in someone else, an intellectual. They had to bring in someone else, someone who had high intellect, and it was Bruce Banner. It had been up to 11 months since the blip happened, and they were not willing to allow it to reach the 1-year mark. Tony finally placed a call to Bruce, and he immediately came over when he heard that they were working on what could save humanity. Bruce Banner was impressed with what Tony and Peter had achieved. Bruce had thought that he was the busy one, as he had finally found how to merge the body of the Hulk with his mind. But seeing the work of Tony, he knew that he was far outmatched. Bruce had first been enraged when he discovered that Peter had rematerialized after the blip, but Tony had not told anyone, even after hearing his reasons. Tony tried and calmed him down, and told him to focus on the matter at hand, as the universe depended on it quite literally. After studying their work, Bruce became more amazed, as they had done really good work that saw the problem they faced. They lacked a specific particle that would enable the time travel process, and Banner knew exactly what they needed. Pym particles, Bruce announced, and he briefly explained what it was to them. The bad news was that both Hank Pym and his daughter, alongside Ant-Man, were erased by Thanos. Bruce told them, sadly, and Peter felt his hopes deflate. "Not so fast," Tony said, as he quickly uploaded a video clip of a holographic screen for all of them to watch, and what they saw astounded them. They saw a security camera feed of Ant-Man entering the quantum realm, and both Hank Pym and his daughter fading, and they both got what Tony was trying to say. Ant-Man was still alive. He was not erased by Thanos. After getting the facts, they all went to retrieve him, and for the time, their plan actually seemed like it could work. Scott Lang could not believe his ears. According to Bruce Banner and the others, he had been in the quantum realm for almost a year, but he was just there for almost an hour. They informed him about Thanos and the war that took place. When Scott heard that both Hank and his daughter were gone, his heart skipped, and he decided that he would do everything within his powers to bring them back. They took Scott to the machine and he supplied them with the Pym particles, and they did a test run. It was a success. Immediately after the test run, they had sent out a signal to all the Avengers and heroes remaining. Even Clint Barton attended. Tony was anxious about how they would take everything, but it did not matter much, as it was all for the greater good. When each and every one of them were present, Tony narrated everything to them with the help of Peter Parker, whom they were surprised to see. They were all still silent, and he finished everything, and surprisingly, they agreed to do it without much complaint. Tony immediately understood, as without voicing it all of them had been deeply affected by the blip, as it took away those they really loved. Bruce Banner also noted, to all of them, that their interference with the past would not affect their present, but it would just create alternate realities. Peter then told them the plan, and they had been working on it. Stark, Bruce, and Scott Lang alongside with Peter Parker had thought the plan through, and they had found no loopholes. They were going to different events in the past to retrieve the Infinity Stones, and they had already mapped out those events. Peter chipped in that they were going in groups, and they quickly assigned themselves. Within minutes, they were ready, and it was the moment for time travel. The mission went very successful, but it was almost too good to be true. But it was not, as they lost Natasha, the Black Widow. She had been paired with Clint Barton, Hawkeye, to retrieve the Soul Stone before Thanos got his hands on it, but they were met with an impossible situation, a sacrifice. The Keeper of the Stone, Red Skull, who had been trapped by the Tesseract during his fight with Captain America in World War II, told them that in order to get the Soul Stone, a soul must be sacrificed. Natasha had decided to sacrifice herself, and she succeeded, even though she had to fight through Hawkeye to do it. The other Avengers got back the various stones, and Thor even got back his hammer, Mjolnir, after a heartfelt talk with his mother. Steve Rogers and Tony Stark were not spared, as they got a taste of raw emotions when they saw their past lover and father, respectively. After the stones had been collected, Bruce and Tony finally got to work in setting up the stones and the gauntlet that they had created alongside Rocket Raccoon. Once they finished, they gave the gauntlet to the obvious candidate, Peter Parker. Peter was shocked, but Tony quickly explained that he was the only one that would be able to withstand the effects of the gauntlet because of Venom and his rapid healing abilities. Tony noted that if he was not able to, that Hulk would have been the optimal choice. Peter was scared about the whole arrangement. Then he remembered the people that had been fated and how he owed it to them to bringing them back. So, are we going to do this or not? Venom snarled, and Peter agreed to do it. Peter Parker put on the gauntlet, and he felt like all of his body, his atoms and molecules, were being ripped apart and replaced almost immediately, repeatedly. In other words, Peter felt like he was in hell. Contracting all of his efforts, Parker thought about bringing back half of the population of the universe, and he snapped his fingers. Just like that, all of the population that had faded away rematerialized. Peter quickly pulled out the gauntlet as he was in pain, and his flesh was sizzling, but it immediately started healing thanks to the Venom symbiote. "You did well, kid," the other Avengers told him, as they patted him on the back. The mood was generally high and elevated, as the Avengers thought that they had won, and for once, everything went according to plan, but they were very wrong. Nebula had been breached, as she had been captured in 2014 during her expedition into the past, and currently her past self, who was still loyal to the Mad Titan, was acting as her and infiltrating the Avengers by providing information to him. Thanos had been overjoyed when he got to know that his plans to destroy half of the world's population actually came to fruition, but his mood quickly turned sour when he realized that the Avengers wanted to change the future. Nebula immediately turned on the time machine on Thanos' orders, and he came into the Avengers compound with one thing in mind, and that was to retrieve the Infinity Stones and wipe out the entire universe and start a new one. The Avengers, both old and the newly rematerialized, were shocked when they saw Thanos emerge with his army, but they wasted little to no time. They jumped into battle with renewed courage. The battle was a fierce one, and Thanos barely had the upper hand, as powerful entities like Captain Marvel, Venom, and surprisingly Steve Rogers, who was now wielding Thor's hammer, gave him a hard time. Thanos finally managed to barely brush them off, and he seized the Infinity Gauntlet. As Thanos was about to wipe out the entire universe, Tony Stark looked at Doctor Strange, and he nodded at him. Tony immediately knew what to do. Tony ran at Thanos and he immediately stole the Infinity Stones without Thanos noticing. "I am inevitable," Thanos said as he snapped his fingers after flinging Tony away. Thanos expected the world to all vanish, but nothing happened. Tony quickly displayed the Infinity Stones in his arsenal, and then he pressed a button in his suit that initiated his bonding with the symbiotic suit he and Peter had been working on. Even as he snapped his fingers and Peter's screams rang out through the battlefield as he figured out what Tony had done. Thanos and his entire army faded, and so did Tony Stark. The battle had been won, but the winning side was not celebrating. Peter had remained unmoved from the spot where Tony had faded for almost a day. No matter what the Avengers had said to him, he couldn't have been gone just like that, Peter kept repeating to himself, as he knew that Tony had been merged with the symbiotic suit before he faded, and that meant that he outed to rematerialize. Soon, even Peter started doubting himself as many theories came to his mind. What if the suit had not completely bonded with Tony before he faded? What if the effects of the gauntlet had been too severe for even the symbiote to rematerialize Tony? When Peter was about to leave with a lot more grief in his heart, as he started accepting the fact that Tony was gone for good, he started seeing a swirl of dust around the spot that Tony had faded, and he beamed like he never had before. "Tony Stark is alive," Peter screamed. This reality has been a very interesting one, as different events have and will take place. All these variations can be pinpointed to the arrival of the Venom symbiote. In this reality, Tony Stark sacrifices his life to save the universe, but something shocking takes place after that because of the symbiotic suit that he wears before snapping his fingers. Come on and let us watch and see how these sequence of events unfold before our own very eyes. Peter was sure that he had never been more grateful to see a swirl of dust in his life. It was not actually dust, but it was miniature atoms of that of Tony Stark starting to reform. Something was very wrong though. They moved and reshaped themselves way too slowly, and Peter immediately had a plan. Tony Stark had created a reinstatement pod to aid symbiotes to reform and heal faster. Peter immediately modified the pod and had placed it on top of where Tony was reinforming. The process became faster, but it was still very slow. Peter had taken 23 days to rematerialize when Thanos had blipped him because of Venom, but he was sure that Tony would not take more than that because he actually wore the gauntlet. All that radiation that passed through him, it's a miracle that he is still alive, Peter said, and Venom agreed. Peter decided that it was time that he let Tony reform and he focus on his personal life, like Tony would have wanted him to. Peter would leave the monitoring process on in the capability hands of Miss Pepper, who had a romantic relationship with Mr. Stark. Peter knew that his Aunt May must have been worried sick about him, because he had not left Tony's side since the battle. They secretly transferred the pod to his secret chamber, and only a few people knew about Tony reforming, as even Nick Fury did not know about it. As Peter thought about Aunt May, he also remembered Ned, and thought about how his best friend must be coping. Former best friend, Venom said, enraged as he was the self-acclaimed best friend of Peter Parker. Peter paid him no mind as he went on to think about Michelle Jones, MJ. One thing the blip had taught Peter was that life was too unpredictable and short. As he faded, he had thought about missed opportunities that he was scared to pursue, and MJ was one of them, as Peter had a crush on her. "Snap back to reality, Mr. Loverboy," Venom said, and a scornful laughter as he told Peter that the idea of MJ dating him was unlikely because according to him, she was not on Parker's class. Peter refused to be undeterred though, as he made up his mind that the first thing he would do when he saw her was to profuse his love for her. Peter quickly stood up from where he was watching Mr. Stark slowly reform, and he said his goodbyes as he left to the outside world. The outside world was great. It seemed like the blip had really softened up people, including the bad guys, as the crime rates had drastically reduced. Peter heard different praises about the heroes. After the war, Captain America had gone back in time to spend his special days with Peggy Carter. When he returned, he had given his shield to Wilson. Then he passed away. There was Black Widow, who had sacrificed her life for the Soul Stone, and then Tony Stark. Peter's heart throbbed when he heard how the people regarded Tony Stark as a hero. "You truly deserve it, Mr. Stark," Peter said. After the war, Peter was sure that there was nothing, as the Avengers, as half of them were dead, or currently incapacitated. But it did not worry Peter, as the world seemed free from threats at the moment. Peter had borrowed one of Tony's jets, contrary of Mr. Happy Hogan, and he had made his way back to Queens. On his request, Happy had dropped him off on his high school block. Peter had a particular fondness for the buildings, and he stood there and reflected on his actions for a while. Then he swung home. For a long time for him, swinging through the city, Peter had never seen it so peaceful. Peter arrived at Ned's house first, and he was so grateful that he was alive. Ned literally screamed his lunch out as Venom startled him with his entrance. After spending some time with him chatting, mostly about what had happened in the war, and also telling him about Michelle Jones, Peter decided that it was time he went home to see Aunt May. Peter immediately left after saying his farewells to Ned. Aunt May was so delighted to see Peter, as she actually thought she had lost him, but she had been comforted by Happy. Peter was a little suspicious of their relationship, but he did not say anything even though Venom was urging him to. Peter quickly cooked up a story about his disappearance, and Aunt May brought it rapidly without even asking permanent questions. Peter assured that she was just too happy to see him again, as she thought she had lost him. Aunt May, Peter, and Happy thereafter had dinner, and it was a very satisfying one. Peter was happy to be home with Happy Hogan and Aunt May, even though he still did not get why Happy was still around. After the events of the day, Peter was exhausted and he quickly crashed on his bed as he passed out with a smile on his face. I don't think the world's gonna suffer another outworldly threat again for a while, Peter thought before he went to sleep. Peter was very wrong. Life had been going very well for the world, as there hadn't been any anomalies in a while. And Nick Fury seriously wished it would stay like that forever, but even he knew that it was impossible. The first strike happened in Mexico, and Nick Fury and Maria Hill were there to investigate it. Fury had noticed several disruptions around the area, and he quickly informed Maria, and they decided that they would have to be there to witness it. Currently, they were in the city of Intanco to investigate it. Fury quickly filled Maria Hill in by telling her that the locals had said that the disruption had a face on it, and soon after that, they were live witnesses to an unidentified creature. Nick Fury and Maria Hill were petrified by the sight of the monster, but they decided that they needed to stop it. Nick and Maria quickly swung into action, but all of their arsenals seemed to have no effect on the creature, who went about destroying things in the city. Just when all hope was about lost, an unidentified person came into play, and with the help of Nick Fury and Maria Hill, the creature was swiftly dispatched. After the battle, the unidentified man introduced himself as Quentin Beck, and he told Nick Fury and Maria Hill his story. Nick Fury knew that according to the situation report he got from Quentin, that the attacks were just starting, and he hoped that they would be able to contain it as the world was short on heroes. Nick Fury quickly remembered a hero that the world still had, and he immediately put a call across to him. Nick Fury called for Spider-Man. Parker had been ignoring Fury's calls as he decided that he wanted to concentrate on his personal life and have none of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s problems, as Tony Stark's problems were weighing him down. Only a few people knew that Tony was currently reforming, and Peter liked it that way. But it came with a downside, as a lot of people were pressuring him, asking him if he would be the next Iron Man, and all sorts of questions. Personally, Peter thought that even if Tony had passed on, he would not have the heart to carry on his legacy as the Iron Man. This is because you're a weakling, Venom snarled, and Peter quickly defended himself. They went back and forth in Peter's mind, until Venom quickly alerted him "Here she comes," Venom signaled to Peter when the last word laced with venom. Peter was waiting up for Michelle Jones, as he had been trying to date her, but his actions had all seemed futile. Venom blamed it on his lack of manliness, but Peter did not allow it to get to him. Parker quickly went to make his move, but he was suddenly cut off by Brad Davis, his competitor for MJ. Peter attributed 100% of his failures for not winning over Michelle Jones to Brad Davis, but Venom claimed that he did so in order to help him sleep at night because he was a failure. Peter had actually developed a mental trash for Venom on relationship matters, as all of the advice of Venom on how to get Michelle Jones had been the most embarrassing moments of his life. Peter cringed as he remembered how he had worn a biker's attire with sunshades inside the cafeteria, and he had bounced his head off the wall because Venom told him that women loved bad boys. Peter's food had been splashed around the place and everyone erupted in laughter, and he could not bring his eyes to meet MJ. Peter cleared his thoughts as he remembered his resolve on the roof of his Queens high school to be more darling and achieving his dreams, and one of them turned out to be Michelle Jones. Peter heaved a deep sigh of breath and went in to talk to Michelle. It was Peter's lucky day as he was successful in winning Michelle over, even though most of it was due to the fact that Midtown's Tech was organizing a trip to Europe due to the kids that were erased during the blip. Peter had been counted as a person that was erased in the blip, even though he was brought back by Venom. Peter was in very high spirits, as he really had high hopes for the trip and how he could forward things with Michelle, but Venom was still very pessimistic. The attack had happened again in Morocco, and Nick Fury, along with Maria Hill and Quentin Beck, had pulled their resources to destroy it. This time, it was an Air Eternal creature. Nick Fury started seeing a pattern, as the first creature was Earth-related, and now this one was air-related. Fury had been consistently trying to contact Parker, but it proved futile as all of his calls kept getting redirected to Happy. Fury was getting infuriated, and he immediately called Happy Hogan. Happy tried making excuses for Parker, but Fury could see through it. Peter was avoiding him. Nick Fury directly asked Hogan if it was true that Peter was deliberately avoiding his calls and redirecting them to him, but as expected, Happy denied it. Nick Fury decided that he would need another plan to contact Peter Parker, as he would need all hands on deck. Currently, Quentin Beck had gone to intercept another threat with 2 spies, and Nick Fury needed to put an end to the anomalies for good. Peter's plans to actually bond with Michelle Jones during the trip turned out to be futile to the prediction of Venom. What made matters worse was that Peter's best friend, Ned, got a girlfriend after the bonding with the girl during the entire trip at Venice. Venom rubbed it in Peter's face as his friend accomplished what he could not in months, in just a few hours. Peter was feeling so downcast, and he stalked at the end of the class during the sightseeing, and he was glad that he had stayed there. A monstrous creature exploded out of the canals in Venice and started attacking the city. It was not until later that Peter knew that its name was Hydro Man. Because Peter was at the back of the class, he was able to sneak quite easily and transform into Venom to combat the monster. Peter tried fighting the monster, but it had no effect on the monster, and Venom voiced his concerns, but Peter was unrelenting. Peter kept up his attacks on the monster until Quentin Beck came and subdued the beast. Peter was in somewhat awe as he watched as Mysterio lured the monster from the canals and destroyed it. Venom was having none of it though, as he felt that something was not quite right. Venom then quietly sneaked out while the crowd's attention was on Quentin, and he transformed back to Peter, who swiftly rejoined the students, as though he had not left for 1 second. What a day, Peter thought, as he did not even realize that his day was only beginning. On the night of the attack, the dreaded meeting with Fury finally approached. Peter was so shocked when he saw Nick Fury, but he tried not to show it, as he did not want Fury to know that he had been avoiding him. Nick Fury, after chatting with Peter, introduced Quentin Beck to him. Venom quickly went into a defensive position as he covered Peter Parker's face to shield his identity. Nick Fury downplayed all his hunches that Venom had by telling Peter that Quentin was a very trusted person who was helping him battle the elementals. Peter quickly apologized and called off Venom, who reluctantly withdrew to reveal Parker's face. Quentin Beck then told Peter that he came from an alternate reality, and so did the elementals. According to him, they had arrived on Earth after the blip, and one elemental was remaining, and that was Molten Man, due to make an appearance in Prague. Even though Quentin Beck's story of how the elementals had killed his family moved Peter, he declined Nick Fury's request to go and fight the elemental in Prague, using his school outing as an excuse. Nick Fury just smiled and allowed Peter to go, much to his surprise. After he had left, Nick Fury immediately changed the location of Peter's school to Prague. Though the trip had different plans, nothing would stop him now from fighting with us, Nick Fury thought, as he smiled. Peter could not believe what he had done. Nick Fury had given him an AI called Edith, embedded on the glasses as a gift from Tony. Nick Fury said that Tony directed that it should be given to Peter on his passing. Peter could not reject the gift without telling Fury that Tony was sort of alive, so he accepted it. Peter also got an upgrade on his suit, even though he had not tried out any features on his first use of the AI. Peter had ordered an orbital drone strike to destroy the bus mistakenly in a feat of rage, as an effort to bond with MJ was yet again thwarted by Jones. Nick Fury was currently telling Peter off. Parker already knew all the things that Nick was telling him about the endangering his classmates, and he was truly sorry. Quentin Beck came over to comfort him, with much to the dislike of Venom, who wanted to rip his head off. Peter quickly left Quentin as he went to position himself for the mission. Hopefully, he would get to spend more time with Michelle Jones before the elemental attacked, Peter told himself. The elemental gave Peter some time, and he spent it wisely. Peter had not been seeing Ned often because his girlfriend, Brant, had been taking most of his time. Peter saw Michelle Jones, and he had hoped that he would bond more with her tonight. Peter's hopes were actually fulfilled, and he got to talk with MJ, but it was very awkward as they spent their time complimenting each other. Venom was beyond relieved when Nick Fury radioed Peter to be in position. Venom told Peter that if he had spent one more second in the conversation, he would have self-destructed. Peter quickly departed, but not before telling Ned to provide an alibi for him and pinging the suspicion of Michelle, who secretly followed him out. Peter Parker, through the use of Edith, had confined his classmates in the State Opera, at the other end of the city, away from the elemental attack. The elemental Molten Man had chosen to attack during the Carnival of Lights, so Peter guessed it was not in a festival mood. As Parker transformed into the Venom symbiote, he noticed a difference in the color of his suit. It was now dark blue, and Venom quickly explained that it was part of the upgrade that Tony Stark made for him. The reason for the change of color was actually quite simple. Since Spider-Man's appearance in Viance, some of his classmates had gotten suspicious of what Spider-Man was doing there, all the way from Queens. If they got to know that Spider-Man also appeared in Prague, then it would confirm their suspicions that Spider-Man is one of them. Parker knew that if it happened, it would not take long before they narrowed it down to him, as he was always missing during a Spider-Man appearance. Quentin Beck suddenly flew beside Peter, making him clear his thoughts as they were about to combat the final and probably the most powerful elemental. Peter had never felt so useless. Everything he threw at the creature did not even faze it. It was only when Quentin Beck's powers seemed to have an effect on the creature. Peter's feelings of uselessness was made even worse when Ned and Brant were in danger at the top of the Ferris wheel. Peter had just managed to barely save them. Ned immediately dubbed him Night Monkey, to clear all suspicions of him being the black-suited Spider-Man. And if Peter had not been so serious, he would have actually laughed. To end the battle, Quentin Beck had performed a move called the Kamikaze Attack to take out the elemental as his own department. Peter's heart quickly skipped, even as he rushed to check up on Quentin, who was fortunately not dead, but injured. Peter was awed by the man, but Venom thought there was something off about him in the whole scenario, even though he could not place it. Peter was present when Fury told Quentin to come to Berlin and build a new Avengers, and Peter thought that he deserved it, even though the only words Nick Fury had for him were discouraging words. Quentin Beck invited Peter for a drink after the battle, and he figured that he could not say no, so he accepted the invitation, and they both walked down to have a drink. "What have I done?" Peter screamed, in sudden realization to Michelle Jones. Currently, Peter was on the Charles Bridge with MJ, and she had shown him a piece of technology which his web has snagged last night in the fight. The piece of technology was actually a projector of the illusion of Molten Man. The attack on Prague was an illusion. Suddenly everything became clear to Peter as he realized that Quentin Beck had been playing them all this time, including Nick Fury. All of the attacks were illusions and Quentin was really the bad guy. Peter was so enraged at himself because last night, when he and Quentin had gone out for a drink, they had thoughts about responsibilities, and Peter thought about it and how he wanted to focus more on his personal life. So he gave Edith to Quentin, despite the warnings of Venom. Now Peter could see that it was all a ploy by Quentin to get the AI. Parker quickly revealed to MJ that he was Spider-Man, and after collaborating with her and Ned for an alibi, he quickly left for Berlin to warn Nick Fury. Quentin Beck was on top of the world as his ploy to get Edith had worked successfully. Quentin had been so full of rage when he heard that Tony Stark had given the inexperienced and extremely immature Peter Parker Edith, but it was okay now as he had it. "Who's laughing now, Tony?" Quentin said in amusement to himself and his employees as well, as they were discarded former members of Stark Industries. Quentin had immediately told them of his plan to cast a grand illusion at London, and that would put him at the Avengers level to become the new Iron Man. Then, he discovered that Peter now knew his secret via a video feed. The rage that Quentin had for Parker was now revived as Spider-Man was on his way to Berlin to warn Nick Fury. Quentin decided that it was time to end him and every one of his friends, and he knew his secret identity. Quentin quickly went to work as he had to move fast to intercept Parker. In Berlin, Parker attempted to reveal the identity of Beck and his plans to Fury and Hill, but he was intercepted by Beck. Quentin immediately ordered a drone to shoot Nick Fury, and Peter was in disbelief. The office building suddenly vanished into a mid-construction building, and Beck started tormenting Peter with various illusions. When it became almost too much for Parker, he was saved by Nick Fury, who shot Beck in the back. Fury then proceeds to ask for the names of the people who knew about Quentin Beck. Peter suddenly smiled and lunged at Fury. "Gotcha," Venom snarled, as he tore into Fury, who turned out to be Quentin in disguise. The color of the environment changed as Venom punched and pounded on him. Suddenly, drones started firing at Venom, and he had to pull out from beating Quentin. Quentin then ended up disappearing. The environment now looked as if it was glitching, as Venom had destroyed some virtual parts of Quentin's armor. "How did you know I was the one?" Quentin said, shaking, as he tried to catch his breath. "It's called spider sense," Peter shouted back at him. Venom had also helped out, because he could sense living organisms too. Quentin told Peter that it did not matter, because he would soon be dead. Venom just laughed, and he vanished completely. Within seconds, he rematerialized with Quentin in his clutches. "You're not the only one that can hide," Venom said, as he delivered a swift punch that knocked Mysterio out, even as he thanked Tony Stark for the camouflage upgrade in his suit. Peter Parker had gone to see how Tony Stark was, and he was happy to see that he was reforming his body parts. It now remained to the internal organs, and Tony Stark would fully be back. Peter had narrated all that had happened to Tony, and he left Edith at his pod side because he did not feel like he was worthy to have it. As Peter left Tony, worthy or not, what he saw on the several billboards left him shattered. Quentin was in court, and he explained with all of his strength Peter Parker was Spider-Man, even as showing evidence. Peter felt his world crumble, but Venom felt very elated by the news. "It was about time the world would get to know me," Venom hissed. Another place, another time. Peter Parker of Earth 96284 bonded with the Symbiote after the planetarium party, giving into his anger and changing his story forever. Peter, with his newfound abilities, defeated Dr. Otto Octavius after a grueling battle over the control of his fusion reactor. A reactor that Ock had created in order to keep his dream alive for renewable energy that could be used across the world. Otto begged Spider-Man not to destroy his dreams, but after everything, Spider-Man, with the powers of the Venom symbiote, was able to easily defeat him, knocking some sense into the late Doctor. Peter begged Otto to shut the machine down. "How do I stop it?" Peter said. Otto grinned, brilliant, but lazy. Parker fell to his knees into the treacherous waters. "Take a look around. See what is happening. We must destroy it." "I can't do that," Otto replied, using his metal arms, launching them into Peter. Spider-Man was caught in the air and left at the mercy of Ock. Otto had Peter right where he wanted him and began to choke him with his forearms, slowly constricting him until there was nothing left of the boy. Peter got out a word. He spoke softly, with nothing left to lose. "I remember when you spoke to me about intelligence, that it was a gift to be used for the good of mankind." Otto had a flashback, a small memory of when he met Peter Parker, shaking his hand, glancing at his wife. "A privilege," Otto replied. "The arms are turning you into something you're not. Don't listen to them," Peter replied, with a choke. "Under those metal arms, you became a disturbed human being. You can't control all of this energy and power. You might put everyone in grave danger if you let the arms control you further." Otto thought about this question and asked Peter if he ever thought about giving up his powers and dreams. Peter remembered the struggle of being Spider-Man, having flashbacks of Uncle Ben, the symbiote trying to control him when he was at the party. Ock put Spider-Man down. Peter fell, slowly rising up, and said to Otto, "I have, because I've learned time and time again that with great power, there must also come great responsibility. And this, what you've done, and what you're going to do, is a responsibility even you can't avoid, Otto. Give up your dreams, and be steady, please." Otto put his head down, having a tear in his eye. He asked Peter to leave, to save himself. He was going to finish this as a man, not a monster. Peter replied, "I can help you." "No," Otto replied. Peter planned to swing away, until the back of his hair jumped up, his senses becoming wider. Peter was hit by debris from the fusion reactor. A loud scream came from the symbiote, as tendrils moved everywhere. The noises and the screams of Otto Octavius. He couldn't give this opportunity up. The symbiote, it was harming him, and many people, and now he was going to kill Otto, one of his friends. Peter saw Otto ripping apart the machine and looked within himself, seeing that his power could lead him into what Otto became. Peter screamed in pain, preparing to rip the symbiote off of him. Peter began to have flashes of Uncle Ben, saying that he loved him no matter what choice he would make, here and now. Parker's eyes opened as he rejected the symbiote, throwing it into the water below. Peter rolled out of the way and saw Otto drowning. Parker rushed to Otto, using the last of his powers to catch Otto. His webs pulled him up with all of his might. "I won't let you die," Peter said. "Not like what happened to Ben. Never again." And with all of Spider-Man's strength, he took Otto from the platform as the tritium sunk into the river below, and it blew up. Peter's eyes opened as he and Otto were pulled into the shoreline by the current. Peter dropped to his knees. It was over, and the symbiote was gone for good. Peter climbed away from the shore, leaving Otto for the police. He had a tear go down his cheek, as he knew that Otto wasn't a bad man, he just had bad luck. The next day, Peter heard everything on the news from the Daily Bugle, how Doc Ock was going into surgery to have his arms removed, and from there, he was going to be tried for his crimes against the city. Although Peter was glad he could save Otto, he knew that he had bigger issues to deal with later, down the line, as Spider-Man and Peter Parker. Peter got into his suit, ready to attend John Jameson's wedding. Parker watched on as MJ walked down the road to meet with John. Deep down, Peter knew that he would find someone later. Right now, he had to focus on recovering from the symbiote and becoming the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Back at the Osborn residence, Harry failed. He failed to find the truth about Spider-Man and sat in his chair contemplating his next course of action. Harry looked into the mirror. He saw Bernard. Bernard put his hand on his shoulder, squeezing it. "Harry," Bernard said, "I need to talk to you." And so Harry learned the truth about his father and how he became Green Goblin. Harry was shocked at this revelation. This whole time he wanted revenge, but he couldn't see through that Spider-Man was the one who tried to save his own father from himself. Harry cried as Bernard hugged the boy. As this happened, the TV broadcasted something, showcasing Spider-Man returning. The two watched as Spider-Man was trying to stop a broken crane from crashing into a building. Peter rushed out of the wedding as he donned his Spider-Man suit once again. The blue and red was back. Peter, with his newfound faith in himself as Spider-Man, rushed into an alleyway, putting his regular clothes in his backpack. Peter leaped into action, rushing from building to building, jumping fast and far. As Parker jumped and rolled, he looked and turned his attention to a massive crane. The operator was electrocuted and lost control of the functions. Peter's hair on the back of his neck flew up as he watched. This was only going to end one way if he didn't step in. It's been so long. Did he really have the strength to become Spider-Man once again? It did matter. The only thing that mattered was stepping into action before it was too late. And so Peter rushed into action as he always did. Spider-Man using his webs to stop the crane from hitting the buildings. Spider-Man pulled the crane to his left, trying with all of his strength before it was too late. As Spider-Man pulled his way, he was getting somewhere until something came from behind him. Him with force he never thought that he would feel. Peter looked an all-in-black outfit that resembled his previous symbiote suit. Only this time, it was more menacing. The figure opened her face to reveal Mary Jane. MJ, Peter said. Mary Jane begged Peter for help. The symbiote then took back what was once MJ's face and told Peter Parker that because of their rejection, he would take MJ from him, unless he took back the symbiote. The alien creature knew everything about Peter Parker's life. He didn't have time to choose. Deep down, Peter still loved MJ, meaning he couldn't let the symbiote consume her. Parker told the symbiote to stop until the symbiote fought Spider-Man on the edge of the crane. The crane slid too far and broke most of the glass from the building, and sheets of the glass began to fall below. People ran, rushing out of the way to make sure they didn't get hit. MJ took Spider-Man by the neck and said, "Make the choice, Pete, or I will." The symbiote began to consume Mary Jane, slowly eating her from the inside out. As she screamed, Spider-Man begged and told the symbiote he would do it. "I'll take you back. Just don't kill MJ. We need to save those people. They will die if we don't," Parker said. Without question, the symbiote threw Mary Jane towards Peter, who grabbed her in time. Peter took his hand as the symbiote reached, rebonding with him. All Parker's efforts were in vain. He tried too hard to forget the symbiote, but the symbiote would always come back. Peter took control of the symbiote, fighting it inside of him. The symbiote tried to beg for mercy, but Spider-Man was too strong and made a deal with the symbiotic creature. He uses him as a host for full control. The symbiote agreed, and they began to save the rest of the people within the building. Spider-Man looked to see Gwen Stacy, a friend of Peter's, hanging on from a phone cord. Peter and the symbiote agreed to rush in and save her. They jumped as fast as they could, Peter using his webs, but it was too late. MJ woke up to see everything below. Spider-Man had his head down, with the lifeless Mary Jane by his side. MJ knew that Peter was Spider-Man because of the symbiote, and her reaction was scared. She couldn't believe that Peter had failed to save a life, and that was the darkest day of Spider-Man's life. Parker was sitting in an alleyway, looking at himself, watching as his life was sealed. When he decided to choose the symbiote again over his own powers, Parker failed his Uncle Ben, and Aunt May hasn't seen him in weeks. Peter looked at himself in the broken mirror and asked the symbiote, "Are you happy? You got what you wanted." The symbiote replied, "We are sorry." Peter knew the symbiote was telling the truth. The symbiote only wanted Peter as a host to survive. Peter Parker was homeless and jobless after the events of Gwen's death. Her father, Captain Stacy, was on a manhunt for Spider-Man, while at the same time, Eddie Brock became the lead person at the Daily Bugle. Aunt May had a funeral for Peter, as they thought that he was killed. MJ was really the only one who knew who he was, but she too was too scared to reach out to him. Parker sat in the rain, thinking of his life. While this was happening, the symbiote told Peter something was off, and something was happening now. Parker became distorted. Buildings and things were changing in front of his eyes. Peter woke up seeing himself in a new world. What shocked him was that there was another Peter Parker being broadcasted. The symbiote told Spider-Man that they were in another world and that they needed to act fast. There were two of them. They slowly got back up from the alleyway, looking around everywhere before leaving to pursue this new Spider-Man. Another place, another time. Peter Parker of Earth 96285 tried to remove the Venom symbiote after realizing the danger it posed to not only himself, but his friends and his family. Parker had recently left the jazz club after causing a fight with Mary Jane and using Gwen Stacy for his personal gain. Now, Spider-Man finds himself ripping off the symbiote. Parker began to claw and scratch his way out of the symbiote. He got closer and closer to finding its weakness, but a small moment would disrupt everything. Eddie Brock, who went to the same church as Spider-Man, pulled his camera out in shock. He was surprised to see Peter Parker with Spider-Man, and he knew with this much dirt, he could get rid of Spider-Man and Peter Parker for good. He didn't have two enemies, he had one. Without thinking, Eddie shot a picture of Spider-Man, who proceeded to rip the symbiote off of him until the camera flash caught Parker off guard. Spider-Man turned his head to see Eddie, who was shaking. He noticed him, and the symbiote used the opportunity to fuel Parker's rage by taking him over for good. Spider-Man turned his head down as Eddie ran out of the church. By the time Eddie was near the door, the figure met him, taking Eddie by the head and smashing him into a brick wall. Brock begged for his life before the symbiote started taking control over Peter's mind, telling him to kill Eddie Brock. Parker said no, letting Eddie go. Eddie ran as fast as he could to the Daily Bugle before Spider-Man caught to where he was going. Meeting Eddie there along with J. Jonah Jameson, Jameson screamed as Spider-Man lunged at the two of them. The symbiote had fully consumed Parker, and he did the unthinkable. Spider-Man grabbed Brock by the neck before snapping it in front of Jameson, who looked on in horror. J. Jonah Jameson pressed the panic button under his desk. Parker tried to take control of himself, but it was far too late. He turned to see police choppers facing him. Was this how Spider-Man was going to end? No, Venom said, taking J. Jonah Jameson by the neck and throwing him out of the Daily Bugle, only to be saved by a glider and a hooded figure in the distance. The late Spider-Man now turned Venom, and he met his friend face to face. Can't let you kill anyone, Pete. It's time we finish this. Harry and Venom fought tooth and nail inside of the Bugle, but Spider-Man was a more experienced fighter, taking Harry's glider and activating the knives within it. Venom lunged at Harry, stabbing the glider within his former friend, who screamed in agony. Being pinned to the wall, JJJ could only watch in horror as he saw Spider-Man commit murder in front of him. Spider-Man realized what he did, unleashing his face at Harry. Peter cried. What had he done? He murdered his friend in cold blood. Peter said, "I'm so sorry, Harry." Harry closed his eyes before his body slumped to the ground. The SWAT team invaded the Bugle while J. Jonah Jameson witnessed Peter Parker as the Spider-Man. The SWAT team had one more option at play, and that was Mary Jane, who told them everything about Spider-Man and Peter Parker. They thought by bringing Mary Jane to the Daily Bugle, it might trigger something within Spider-Man, giving them the advantage to take him down. Captain Stacy ordered his team in the building with Mary Jane, and Mary Jane opened the door and was able to evacuate J. Jonah Jameson out of the building while keeping Peter calm. Spider-Man, now Venom, saw through her plans. The symbiote showcased everything to Spider-Man, and how after everything, she betrayed Peter Parker. And not only that, she betrayed May. MJ walked towards Venom, putting her hand on his chest. Peter's symbiote mask slowly went down as tears went down his face. "Why, MJ?" Peter said. MJ cried. Peter looked around, and he looked at Harry. "What have you done?" Get rid of it, Pete. Peter tried to fight the symbiote. He dug deep within his soul to fight for control. Tendrils waved around the room as loud screams came out of Peter's mouth. Captain Stacy took the opportunity to fire at Peter, but it was the worst mistake of his life. He dodged the bullet, and it went into Mary Jane's chest. MJ gasped for breath, but it didn't come. Captain Stacy yelled no. Venom grabbed Mary Jane before she hit the ground, dropping her body on the ground. Venom at that moment realized he could take full control of Peter Parker, and that is what the symbiote did. The bugle was filled with bodies, Stacy on the floor, Harry next to MJ. Venom screamed in pain, but something happened. The room in the front of Spider-Man was shifting. Peter and the symbiote were kicked back into a wall. Venom slowly woke up in a building. An abandoned building, and for what it was worth, maybe it was all a dream. Spider-Man took control of the Venom symbiote again, revealing himself through the reflection. What happened here, he said. Peter and Venom took time to investigate the world around them, but the symbiote soon relaxed and told Peter he was in a new world, a new beginning to start fresh. Peter tilted his head to see another Peter Parker, who was in the same suit as him, being exposed to the public eye. Venom and Peter hid in the shadows. Their next plan was to meet with this new variant and take his Venom symbiote. It had been days since the encounter with the Green Goblin and becoming a hero within the city. Peter knew that although Captain Stacy was watching over him as the new hero of New York, he had to be put into line. Electro was working with the police as a hero now, and it felt weird to have Spider-Man and Electro running around New York City. Peter told himself this was for Gwen. After all, she died saving him. And if it wasn't for her, he might not have been Spider-Man after all. Parker wasn't able to graduate from high school. The public knew who he was, and he was famous. A lot of people called him a hero, but some called him a villain waiting to strike. Peter needed time for himself, and went to Aunt May's and Uncle Ben's to clear his head. It was hard to clear his mind with a symbiote always in the back of your thoughts, knowing everything. Deep down, Parker knew he never needed the symbiote, but the power it gave him was the only way he could defeat villains so easier, and it kept his senses sharper. Peter was becoming consumed each day without knowing it. When Peter came home, he talked with May and Uncle Ben about the symbiote. I feel like I'm being taken over, Peter said, as he sat down on the old rough-looking chair. I need help, but I don't know what to do, he said. Ben walked to Peter slowly and offered his hand. He told Peter that if he takes his hand, he will know what to do. Parker took Ben's hand and realized at that very moment he chose the wrong path. Parker had flashbacks of when he was bitten by the radioactive spider, and when he met the robber who had the symbiote to begin with. The symbiote this entire time was trying to control everything he did, and was sucking on Peter's raw power, because he was stronger than the symbiote to begin with. The symbiote realized Ben was becoming a threat to his hold on Peter Parker, and without thinking, the symbiote took control. The symbiote whipped Ben across from his chair, and he hit his back on the wall. May screamed, "Peter, what are you doing?" "Stop," she said. Peter looked at her. He didn't want to do it, but the symbiote was taking control. Parker tried to regain his footing, but it was too late. He screamed, "Get out of here, May. Please hurry. I can't control it. What are you doing?" Peter asked the symbiote. Peter stood, still gaining control of the symbiote as May was near the door, and Ben, who was still unconscious from the assault, stood up. Venom spoke to Ben. "We will do what we want when we want, old fool." Ben slowly crawled to his feet and asked Peter if he was ready to get rid of it. Peter stood frozen, like he couldn't move anything. He tried his best, but nothing came. Venom rushed to Ben and kicked him into the wall, proceeding to pick him up by the back of his neck. Ben mumbled a word before Venom looked at Ben and threw him into the glass table. May screamed, grabbing a bat from the shed. She pleaded with Peter to stop. She hit Venom, but the symbiote grabbed the bat, and Venom knocked her out. May slumped to the floor, with Ben yelling no, and rushed to spear Venom into the wall. Blood was everywhere. Venom managed to dodge the attack and pushed Ben to the ground. He held him there and made Ben watch in horror as he took the bat to May's face, before Peter screamed, ripping parts of the symbiote off of him. "You take May out of here, please," Peter said. And Ben did that just in time. Peter fought with the symbiote in the house, telling the symbiote it was weak and that he didn't need it anymore. The symbiote then took control of Peter, and Peter tried his best to fight it, but he faded. The symbiote took him to a nearby church, and while Peter was still sleeping, things began to shift. The world started changing before Venom's eyes. He asked Peter to wake up, and hours later, Peter woke up to see a kid nearby, wearing what looked like his costume. It was nighttime, and he knew he needed to follow him. The cold breeze watched over the sky as the clock was ticking, and the loud rants from J. Jonah Jameson could be heard across the city like wildfire, spreading the word Spider-Man is Peter Parker. A figure walked towards the massive TV screen, witnessing the latest news playing out. "Where am I?" the figure said. The man turned his head when he realized the suit the boy had in the pictures. The figure rushed into the alleyway, tripping with all of his emotions inside of him, trying to calm down, breathing heavily. The figure looked at himself in the mirror, and the power, the voices were gone. Eddie Brock heaved a sign of relief, calming himself down. Eddie took a moment to reflect on the past actions that led him to this new world. He saw Peter with the pumpkin bomb, and then a flash of white. "I had him right where I wanted him, and now I'm just here," Eddie said. "This is all Spider-Man's fault. He tried to kill me and take my power away. It won't work," Eddie said, clenching his fists as he looked above the screen. He knew that he had to act fast if he was going to get the symbiote back, and that was what Eddie did. Now, in the original Tom Holland symbiote universe, Peter Parker and Venom are two to the world. He wasn't budging. The moment he tried to tell them to leave him alone, his symbiotic arm emerged and launched towards the wall. The scene scared MJ and Aunt May so much that they held each other. Suddenly, Peter's eyes went black. It was clear that Venom was in control of his body. Explained that Peter's emotions were all over the place, and he reacted to it. Then, he retreated back into Peter's subconsciousness. The effect of this retreat was Peter's eyes Quentin. But Peter knew things weren't just going to be the same ever again. When Peter got to his room, he asked Venom why Venom had done what he did earlier. And he knew that Venom was not just reacting to his emotions. He knew that there was something else. He wondered what it was. Venom used the opportunity to inform Peter that he wanted the world to know him finally. When Beck exposed them, he could finally be recognized as the hero he had turned out to be, and he was disappointed to see how Peter hated what was happening. Peter explained that things were just not that simple. His entire life would be affected by this change, and this would in no way affect Venom. Venom noted that Peter could still live happily. Parker now signed that Venom wasn't human, so he'd never understand. Immediately, Peter could feel the pain in his chest. He knew that the pain he felt did not belong to him. What he just said hurt Venom extremely. He attempted to apologize, but now he felt nothing. He couldn't feel Venom inside of him. Then the sad reality hit him. Venom just blocked him out. It had been weeks since Peter's exposure as Spider-Man and Venom. Fortunately, he had been able to get his criminal charges dropped, but things weren't any better. He had walked around with a lot of stares. He had a lot of people wanting his autograph, but he also had a lot of people who thought that he was a monster. Several people referred to the Lagos massacre all over again. The monster inside Peter did that, they would say. Soon enough, everyone was scared of Peter. They were scared of the day Venom would emerge. They were scared that Venom would attack them. In fact, Peter was unsure he would ever get admitted into college. He was also scared for Ned and MJ. They were his friends, and he was afraid that their admissions would be affected because of him too. The entire situation was just frightening, but what hurt Peter the most was the fact that he could no longer feel Venom. He knew what he said hurt Venom a lot, and now Venom had just blocked him out. He tried apologizing so many times, but Venom never came out. Happy. This was all unfair. Happy was the only person Peter thought he could talk to, as they'd known each other for a long time since Tony Stark. Happy had become like family, and Peter figured that he had the ability to advise him when necessary. Right now, Peter was in his room, asking what to do. Without Venom coming out, Peter couldn't even use the symbiotic suit, but that was the least of his problems. He needed to talk to Venom. He needed his friend back, and he hoped Happy had a solution for him. Unfortunately, Happy did not have a clear solution for Peter. He believed that Venom would always show up for Peter when he needed him. He just advised Peter to give Venom some time. After all, the symbiote had just begun to feel human emotions since it bonded with Peter. That explained the hurt Venom felt. Happy just believed that with time, everything would be alright. However, Peter had other plans, and he quickly got a spare suit. When Peter reached the Sanctum, he was greeted by Stephen Strange and Wong, the Sorcerer Supreme. After a while, he finally had the opportunity to have an audience with Strange. Parker immediately explained his plan to Dr. Stephen Strange. He needed Strange to use a spell to make everyone forget that he was Spider-Man and Venom. Strange had his initial doubts, but he decided to run the spell for Peter. Of course, Wong had been present and warned Strange not to go ahead with such a spell. Nevertheless, Strange had a habit of disobeying, and he already disobeyed Wong already. Soon enough, he had begun the spell. As Strange was performing the spell, Peter began to mention all the persons that he needed to retain their memory of him being Spider-Man. As he mentioned each person, Strange had to alter his spell. However, there was only so much alteration one spell could take. The spell immediately backfired, an event that made Strange exceedingly upset. Peter immediately began to apologize, and in his bid to justify everything, he spilled that he had earlier met with Happy for advice, and had not met with the college administrators. This upset Strange even further, and he instructed Peter to leave the Sanctum immediately. Peter, on seeing what he had done, decided to leave the Sanctum. Apparently, he was going to have to find another way to help his friends get into college. Peter was currently in a frenzy, as he looked for how to catch up with the college ambassador, and convince her into letting his friends get admitted. Peter understood if he was not accepted because of his current situation, but he could not bear to see his friend not getting admitted just because they were associated with him. Peter had a very dark thought, that his friends might also turn on him and block him out like Venom if they got affected because of being associated with him. Peter already felt very awful with the way Venom had been treating him, and he knew that he would not be able to bear it if his girlfriend, Michelle, and his best friend, Ned, stopped talking to him. "Wow, you must be really angry not to comment on Ned being my best friend," Peter said to Venom, but he was still met with no reply. Peter could swear that since the encounter with Strange, that he had started feeling weird. It was as if there was a deep rage building inside of him. Peter had wanted to attribute it to being Venom's fault, but the rage felt way too deep. Peter quickly brushed it off as Venom was still being angry with him. Peter quickly sighted Flash Thompson, and he went ahead to meet with him. Under normal circumstances, Peter would not go to Flash for anything, but he needed to get the location of the college ambassador, and fast. Flash as usual made it hell for Peter. Flash told Parker that he needed something in return, and Parker quickly accepted, even though it required him affirming Flash's ridiculous claims about his situation as Venom. Immediately, Flash had told Peter about the location of the college ambassador. He went off in pursuit of her. Parker had never been as grateful for the traffic congestion as he was now. The traffic congestion slowed down the vehicle that the college ambassador was in, and Parker was gaining on her fast. As Parker reached her, he started saying his rehearsal speech after why the college should admit his friends, and not even him. Then, Peter saw the reason for the traffic congestion, and he was no more grateful. Peter saw a man with metal arms, wreaking havoc, and only later did he get to know that the man was known as Dr. Octopus. Spider-Man politely paused his discussion with the college ambassador, and he rushed to save the civilians. The battle was really tough, as Peter was surprised at the agility and the speed of the man's arms. It was as if they had a mind of their own, and that meant that Peter was fighting with multiple opponents at once. What also baffled Peter was that the man seemed to know him, but he knew that he had never met the man before, even in his worst nightmares. Peter saw an opening and he decided to take it, but he realized that he was too late. Soon after that, he was held down by Dr. Octopus's metal arms. Parker got to know the hard way that his metal arms were made of nanotechnology. As Doc Ock stole some of his suit, it actually came as a plus to Peter, as he used the suit to save the MIT administrator, who promised to give both Ned and Michelle their admissions. Out of the gratitude, and Peter was very pleased. Before anything else could happen, a portal opened, and they were suddenly back at the sanctum with Ock, along with some strange people placed in a cell. Peter was also confused, and he immediately saw Doctor Strange, who tried to explain everything to him. Doctor Strange had so wanted Wong to be wrong, but deep down, he also knew the truth. Strange knew that messing with the memories of everyone on the planet had serious repercussions, and in their case, it affected the multiverse. Strange tried to explain what was happening to Peter. He told Peter that when he kept modifying the spell, it caused a breach in the multiverse, and that's why multiple people that were somehow affiliated with Spider-Man were in their universe. Peter was dumbfounded, and Strange could not blame the kid, even though it was his own fault. Strange quickly told Peter that they had to send each and every one of the villains back to their respective universes, but he did not have all of them, so he magically modified Spider-Man's suit so that he could bring all the villains on the loose back. Peter had called Michelle Jones and Ned to aid him, and then he went out on the hunt for the criminals. Peter had a very hard time gathering them, and he would have been unsuccessful if it was not for the help of some extra people. Peter had gotten the help from Sandman in capturing Electro, even though he had sort of betrayed him by capturing him too. Peter also had the help from his Aunt May, as she gave him the location of Norman Osborn, who was at her feast program. Peter could also not forget the help that MJ and Ned gave him. Deep down, when Electro fired that bolt at him, Peter had secretly wanted it to blast him, as a thought that Venom might come out to save him then. The words of Happy still rang in Peter's ear, as he told him that Venom would be there when he needed him most. But so far, all he got from Venom was silence and a deep feeling of hate and loathing. Strange called Spider-Man's attention as he wanted to send the villains back to their respective universes, but Peter could not allow that, sadly. Peter decided that he had to make his move. Peter had discovered that everyone they captured died in their respective universes, and he wanted to change their fate. He wanted to fix them. But Strange was going to have none of it. Strange had already meddled with the universe by trying to wipe everyone's mind, but he was not going to meddle with the entire multiverse. Strange told Peter that they had to die in their universes, or it would change their universe's events to unbelievable repercussions. Strange believed in sacrifices for the greater good, but Peter obviously was not a believer, and he entered into a conflict with Doctor Strange, who wanted to perform the spell on the villains. The conflict was a very interesting one, as Peter only had to rely on his quick reflexes and brain power, while Strange used the mystic arts. Strange was tired of the conflict, and just wanted to get things over with, as he could not get a hold of Spider-Man. This was displayed when he separated Spider-Man's soul from his body, as Peter's spider sense made his body able to still evade Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange then decided that enough was enough, and he moved the fight into the mirror dimension. Peter was surprised, but using his knowledge of geometry, he was able to escape the mirror dimension. Peter trapped Dr. Strange in there, as he also stole his sling ring. Once Parker escaped, he called his friends Michelle and Ned, and they started working on fixing the villains. Peter informed the villains that he was going to release them and take them to where they would be fixed, and they all agreed on not killing him. After that, Peter released them, and he took them to Happy's apartment. The first operation had been a success. Octavius's upper brain function had been restored, and now Peter was working on Electro. The mood was generally cheerful, but Peter suddenly felt a sinister presence in the room, and he immediately pinpointed it to Norman. Peter then suddenly realized that it was no longer Norman Osborn that was facing, but rather, it was the Green Goblin, who laughed manically. The Green Goblin had succeeded in convincing Electro to fight against his cure. Electro quickly tore off the mechanics that Peter built to suck off his powers, and he found an arc reactor. Electro quickly put it on and blasted Octavius out of the building. Green Goblin took the advantage of his distraction and he wanted to escape, but Peter blocked him as Venom suddenly came alive. Peter became very happy as he discovered that Happy was right, that Venom would emerge when he needed him. Peter then discovered that something was very wrong. Peter's eyes began to go white, as if the symbiote was trying to take over his body. The time to strike is now, Venom said. Peter was confused as he dropped to his knees. It felt like Peter's insides were breaking apart. Parker screamed in pain and asked Venom to stop. "I'm sorry for everything," Peter said. Before the symbiote launched Peter away into the wall, Parker tilted his head up and saw Green Goblin laughing, and it was matched by Venom's laughter. Suddenly, Venom leaped and attached itself to Green Goblin. Peter was left in shock and he was shattered. "We will kill you here, even in your nightmares," Venom stated. Suddenly, the newly formed symbiote goblin said that they were still weak and needed to merge properly before they attacked. Peter deduced that this was the voice of Norman Osborn. After a lot of very creepy back and forth arguments between themselves, they decided that they would kill Peter Parker later, and the Green Goblin's glider appeared, and he swiftly escaped the room. Peter was so weak, as Venom had drained most of his strength and willpower when he left him. Peter then decided that it must have been a lie from the beginning. Venom could not possibly leave him like that. "I have to get back," Peter told himself as he went after both Venom and the Goblin. What Peter saw would hurt him for ages to come. Peter crawled, trying to stand, but it was no use. Most of the symbiote had drained Spider-Man's life force from him, meaning Peter was weaker than most humans. Parker's eyes opened from the phase of the battle, choking on the smoke and ash surrounding the area. Peter watched in horror as symbiote Green Goblin took May by the neck and began to strangle her, laughing while he did it. Spider-Man screamed "No!" lunging at the symbiote goblin, who took Parker by the neck, before forming a symbiote spike and stabbing it into May. Symbiote goblin dropped Peter. Peter screamed in rage, feeling the betrayal of the Venom symbiote and the murder of his Aunt May. Spider-Man fought like he never fought before in his life. Spider-Man changed punches to the symbiote goblin, who was toying with Parker. He tried to dodge the goblin. Everything he tried to do, Goblin would dodge the attack and make it look like Peter was going to win, and then he would take it away from him. Goblin took Peter by the head before smashing his face into the wall, over and over again, while blood spilled everywhere. He then shot a web at Spider-Man. Parker glanced over, but it was already too late. Tick, tock, as all Parker could hear, before a pumpkin bomb exploded into Peter's chest, knocking his body all the way near May's. When Peter did look up, they had disappeared. Aunt May was struggling to speak, and tears filled Peter's eyes. Peter knew he had to get to her immediately. He had to get medical attention, but Aunt May stopped him, as she kept trying to mutter words to him. Peter quickly bent down to her, and he heard what she was trying to say. "Not your fault," Aunt May painfully gasped. Peter knew that it was all of his fault, and he was not going to argue with May, but she shook her head slowly, and Peter could only weep. She beckoned him closer, and then she said, "With great power comes great responsibility." Those were her last words, and Peter could not believe that they were. Peter tried and tried again, but he could still not hear her breathing, nor could he feel her pulse. Peter would have probably kept trying for eternity, but the cops stormed the place and Peter had to escape while Happy caused a distraction for him. Peter wondered what Happy must be going through after the death of Aunt May, and his guilt expanded further. Parker managed to avoid the police capture, but it costed him everything. Maybe he was wrong about the villains. As Peter looked at the destruction he had caused through the city, he was intruded on by yet another Daily Bugle broadcast. Everything Spider-Man touches becomes chaos and is destroyed. God help us all. Peter sat in the rain with tears in his eyes. All of his power had been drained, and he felt that he had nothing left. Dropping to his knees, Peter sat in the rain, crying. Ned had been trying to use the sling ring, and currently, he was getting some luck. MJ then suggested that he should try and open a portal to Peter, and things had gotten really complicated. Ned and MJ were very concerned about his well-being, as they just heard the news that Aunt May was dead. Ned tried opening a portal. "I just wish we could see Peter," Ned shouted as the sparks gave way. MJ asked Ned to try once again. "I just wish we could see Peter Parker," Ned replied, and a portal opened. They were shocked to see the figure jump out of the portal. Standing before them was the Amazing Spider-Man. He had the same symbiote suit as the previous Peter, but this one was different, digging a more blue look, maybe blue highlights. Ned and MJ were shocked to see him as the symbiote let Peter's face out. "I'm looking for the kid," he said. Ned and MJ stood still. "Where is he?" Peter asked. "Why should we tell you?" MJ said. "Because he's in danger. If he is like anything like me, he needs to remove that suit." Ned asked what he meant by that. "I've been thinking the same thing, and if my math is correct, we were sent here because of Venom's actions. Or another Venom for that matter. I know what it's like to be on the receiving end. I don't want him to end up like me. He needs my help." MJ and Ned signed. Things keep getting worse by the minute. More villains and more Spider-Men? Now what? Ned told the other Spider-Man that he would try again. Maybe, if he asked for the ring, they could get to the real one. As Spider-Man along with Ned and MJ waited impatiently for another portal to open. "I just wish we could see Peter," Ned said. The portal began to open quite large, and another Spider-Man jumped into the scene. He was in a more purple slim down suit with a different hue. "Hi," Peter said as he turned his head to meet the other Spider-Man in the room. The two came face to face with each other as the two symbiotes and Peters talked. "Another universe. I dig it," said Peter 2. "What happened to you guys?" Peter 3 said. "Well, long story short, I was sitting in an alleyway until I was just here." "Do we all have symbiotes?" asked Peter 3. "I'm not so sure, but I'm starting to think maybe these things are what brought us here to begin with." "We need to find the kid," Peter 3 said. "You're right," Peter 2 replied. Ned was discouraged from opening any more portals to Peter's, as they were scared of what they might find on the receiving end. After asking some questions about what Peter's favorite place was, they quickly went to pursue him. Peter still sat, staring at the TV screen. He felt that maybe May would come out of the screen to give him advice. He imagined that, but then the thought left his mind, when a voice echoed in the distance. "I've been looking for you, Peter Parker," the figure said. Peter turned around. "Who are you and what do you want?" he said. "I know all about you. Do you remember what you did to me?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Peter replied. "I'm done with people accusing me of things." Peter turned his head to see a man in a worn-down hoodie. The man was shocked when he saw his face. He was confused that this wasn't his Peter Parker. "Who are you?" he asked. "He's Eddie Brock," another voice replied. Out of the shadows came another. "He ruined our life, and now we'll be ending his." Eddie was shocked when the symbiote creature revealed himself to be none other than Peter Parker. Eddie replied, "Parker." The symbiote figure stood still. "You took everything from us. You took Mary Jane, Harry, and you made us kill everyone we loved because you exposed us to the world. Now, you must die, Brock." Eddie was confused by the comment. It seemed as though everything was reversed, but it didn't matter. Brock rolled out of the way towards Peter 1. "Stay back," Peter 1 said, in a defensive position. "Get behind me." Brock rolled behind Peter. As Peter 4, the symbiote consumed, landed a punch on Peter 1, who tried to dodge it. "Die," is all that came out of the symbiote's mouth, before launching Peter 1 into the Daily Bugle News screen. "Right where we want you." Peter 4 then killed Eddie Brock, draining his life away from him. "No!" Peter 1 shouted. The symbiote consumed monster then took Peter 1 by the neck and started to sniff him. The symbiote wasn't present within his body. Peter 1 was then slammed into the ground, where the symbiote consumed Spider-Man let out a roar. "You sent us here. You're unworthy of us. You must die." Preparing to finish the job, Spider-Man rolled out of the way, nearly avoiding the symbiote blade, until webs pulled the symbiote monster away from Peter, as Peter 2 and Peter 3 kicked the symbiote monster in the face, using their symbiote webs to try and tie the creature down. The creature took the opportunity while the two Spider-Men tried to pull him away from Peter 1. Peter 1 saw the smirk on the symbiote creature's face. He proceeded to use their webs by taking them in his two hands and began to absorb both of their symbiotes. Peter 2 and Peter 3 screamed in pain as the symbiote monster began to eat away at their symbiotes, unbonding them to the much more powerful Peter 4. Peter 4 revealed himself to the three Spider-Men, and so did they. "No, you can't be me. What have I become?" Peter 2 said to Peter 4. "With great power comes great responsibility, and great opportunity to take all the power. I couldn't see it before, it was too late, but now I see what I must do." "And what's that?" Peter 1 replied. "End them," Peter 4 said. "I will become the most powerful symbiote host. We will have one more to go." Peter 4 then vanished from thin air. "I've never seen that before," Peter 3 said. Now that Peter 4 took Peter 2 and Peter 3's symbiotes, he was becoming more powerful by the second. Soon, he would have 3 symbiotes from the multiverse. If he took Green Goblins, then he might be unstoppable. "We need to send them home," Peter 2 replied. "I can't," Peter 1 said, as he explained what Aunt May told him when he tried to fight off the symbiote goblin. "With great power comes great responsibility," Peter 1 said. That's when it hit the 3 Spider-Men. After each of their long journeys, they all chose power over responsibility, and they knew it too, but they kept on doing it. Peter 1 told them that he still wanted to cure all of them, and maybe deep down, they could cure Peter 4 of the symbiote. "Could it be possible?" Peter 1 asked. "Yeah, I know the symbiote's weakness. When Captain Stacy pruned my symbiote off of me, he used a sonic gun. I think if we can implement this, we might be able to save him, but we need cures for the rest of them." They were able to spur Peter to fight in memory of Aunt May and Ben. It was on. The 3 Peters, along with Michelle and Ned, worked on the various remedies, even though the latter felt very uncomfortable when he learned that the 2 Peters' best friends had tried to kill them before. The 3 Peters also deduced that the spell from Doctor Strange had affected Venom very negatively and turned him evil, meaning that when all of them came to this world, whatever evil their symbiotes had were amplified. The 3 Peters put the past behind them, and now they needed to work on the cures. Peter 2 asked about the Sandman creature. He never saw it before in his universe. And well, they tried their best to get cures made. That's what they had to do. After the cures were finished, they decided that it was time to take care of business once and for all. The 3 Spider-Men swung to the building, with each cure in hand. They planted everything perfectly, and while they placed all their cures, the symbiote Peter 4 interrupted them, challenging them to a fight. The fight broke out as the battle raged on between Peter 4, now consumed by the Venom symbiote, and the 3 Spider-Men. The skies above New York City grew darker and more ominous with each passing moment. Lightning cracked and thunder boomed as the very fabric of reality was being torn apart by the sheer power of the symbiote. Peter 4, now completely consumed by the Venom symbiote, had become an unstoppable force of destruction. His strength, speed, and agility were far beyond any of the Spider-Men had ever encountered before, and with every passing moment, it seemed as if their chances of victory were growing slimmer and slimmer. But despite the overwhelming odds against them, the Spider-Men refused to give up. They fought back with everything they had, using their unique powers and skills to try and find a way to defeat Peter 4 and the symbiote once and for all. As the battle raged on, it became clear that this would be a fight to the death. There could be no other way. The fate of an entire multiverse hung in the balance, and the 3 Spider-Men knew that they had to do whatever it took to emerge victorious. Peter 2 found himself face to face with Peter 4, the symbiote monster. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. This was Peter Parker. This was really him, transformed into something that he could never even begin to comprehend. Peter 2 tried to reason with Peter 4, pleading with him to fight against the symbiote's control. But Peter 4 was far too gone. The symbiote had taken a hold of him, and he was now a monster, a danger to everyone around him. The 2 Peters clashed, their webs and fists striking each other with ferocity that was both awe-inspiring and heartbreaking. Peter 2 could feel the weight of their history together. The memories of all their battles that they had fought flooded back to him. As the fight continued, Peter 2 felt a sense of despair creeping up on him. Was there really no hope for Peter 4? Had the symbiote truly consumed him completely? The problem with Peter 2 was that he was literally fighting himself, and he knew everything that Peter 4 had to do to journey to that point, and it was a very sad scenario. But just as he was about to give up, Peter 4 let out a gut-wrenching scream, as if he was fighting against the symbiote's control with every fiber of his being. As the 3 Peters worked together using their webs to try and rip the symbiote off of Peter 4, they could feel the sheer power and strength of the symbiote pushing back against them. It was as if the symbiote itself was alive, and it was fighting tooth and nail to the host to hold on. It was holding on to the host. But as they continued to pull and tug, something unexpected happened. Peter 4 suddenly screamed out, a brutal cry that echoed through the city streets. "I'm being controlled," he yelled. "The symbiote is making me do these things that I don't want to do." Hearing this, the 3 Peters realized that they needed to act fast. They put all their strength and power into their efforts, pulling with all their might to try and free Peter 4 from the grip of the evil Venom symbiote. For a moment, it seemed as though they might have succeeded. The symbiote began to weaken, and Peter 4's form became more visible beneath it. But just when it seemed like victory was in their grasp, the symbiote fought back with renewed strength and vigor. The 3 Peters knew that they couldn't give up. They had to keep fighting no matter how difficult it seemed. With a renewed sense of determination, they continued to pull and tug, using all of their strength and power to try and free Peter 4 from the grip of the symbiote. Peter 2 saw an opportunity and used all of his strength to try and rip the symbiote off of Peter 4. Peter 3 and Peter 1 joined in, and together they managed to weaken the symbiote's hold on Peter 4. Peter 4, now free from the symbiote's control, collapsed to the ground. He looked up at the 3 Peters with tears in his eyes, realizing the gravity of what he had become. Peter 2 rushed to his side, embracing. He could feel Peter 4's shame and guilt radiating off of him. "It's okay," Peter 2 whispered. "We'll get through this together." Peter 4 nodded, a small smile creeping on his face. He knew that he had been given a second chance, a chance to redeem himself and make amends for his past mistakes. As Peter 4 was helped to his feet by the 3 Peters, they suddenly heard a menacing laugh that echoed through the city streets. Turning their attention to the source of the laughter, they saw the symbiote goblin. The goblin had been watching the battle from a distance, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, with the symbiote banished from Peter IV's body, he saw his opportunity to make himself even stronger. Without hesitation, the symbiote goblin lunged forward, grabbing a hold of the remnants of the symbiote that had been ripped from Peter IV's body. As he absorbed the symbiote, his strength and power grew, making him a formidable opponent for the three Peters. Peter too knew that he had to protect Peter IV at all costs. He used his web-slinging abilities to swing to a nearby rooftop, where he laid Peter IV down and stood guard over him. Meanwhile, Peter I and Peter III emerged, the symbiote goblin in a fierce hand-to-hand combat fight. Despite their best efforts, however, the goblin proved to be too powerful for them to defeat on their own. But just when all hope seemed to be lost, Peter I saw an opportunity. As the symbiote green goblin lunged forward for a final attack, Peter I used his web shooters to create a powerful electric shock, stunning the goblin for a moment. Taking advantage of this monetary weakness, Peter I landed a powerful blow, knocking the symbiote green goblin to the ground. And then, without hesitation, he pulled out a pumpkin bomb, just like what had happened before in the original timeline, and threw it at the fallen goblin. The bomb exploded in a burst of flames, and smoke completely destroyed the symbiote green goblin and the remnants of the symbiote. With the battle over and the city safe once more, the three Peters regrouped on the rooftop where Peter II had been guarding Peter IV. They knew that they had been through something incredible, and that their bond of friendship had only grown stronger. As the four Peters caught their breath, they saw the other villains starting to converge on their location. But before they could attack, they were stopped in their tracks by Doctor Strange, who had finally managed to regain control of the multiverse after coming back from the mirror dimension. With a wave of his hand, Strange sent the villains back to their respective universes. And the city was once again at peace. As the reality around them began to warp and twist, the three Peters knew that their time together was coming to an end. They looked at each other, grateful for their bonds that they had formed during their brief time together. Peter I in particular felt a deep sense of remorse for everything he had done. He turned to Peter II, III, and IV and thanked them for their help, apologizing for his past mistakes. With one final gesture, Peter I used the same spell that brought the villains to this reality to send them all back. As he did, he could feel the weight of his responsibility lifting from his shoulders, and he felt lighter than he had in a long time. As the spell took effect, the three Peters looked at each other one last time, their memories of their incredible adventure already starting to fade. And as this reality around them dissolved into nothingness, they knew that they had been a part of something truly special. They had been given a chance to be heroes in a way that they never thought possible. And they had done it together. As the multiverse realigned itself, Peter I found himself back in his own reality, just as he had been before. But something had changed within him, something that he could not quite put his finger on. He knew that he had been given a second chance, a chance to be a hero, a better person. And he knew that he couldn't waste that chance. With a newfound sense of purpose, Peter I donned his Spider-Man suit as he leaped into action, ready to face whatever challenges laid ahead, and he swung through the streets of New York. He couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the three Peters, who had helped him find his way. Just when he thought all was over, he found himself soaring through a familiar skyline. It was his world, his New York City, but something was different. As he landed on a rooftop and looked over out to see the city, the unmistakable glow of the Stark Tower in the distance began to glow. He couldn't believe his eyes. Could it be possible? Without hesitation, he took off towards the tower. As he got a closer look, he saw a figure waiting for him on the roof. It was Iron Man. "Hey kid," Tony said with a grin. "Long time no see." Peter was speechless, and he thought that he had lost Tony forever. But here he was, alive and well. "I know that you've been through a lot," Tony said, his expression turning serious. "But we all need you more than ever. There's something big coming, and we're going to need all your help." Peter nodded, a fierce determination taking hold of him. He had faced the multiverse before, and now he had to do it again. He was side by side with Tony Stark. As he swung off into the midnight, he knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but with his friends by his side and Iron Man back in the fight, he was ready to face it head on. And that is going to be it, everybody, for this very interesting alternate take on the No Way Home storyline. I hope that you enjoyed the complete Symbiote Saga event. What if Peter Parker had the symbiote in the MCU? The complete movie. It was a very interesting take, and you can tell that it's different from the original No Way Home ending. This is how I wanted it to end. So if you enjoyed the very beginning, I really hope that you do. And I do want to say, I think I did miss an opportunity during the Civil War storyline, because in that storyline, I wanted to actually have the super soldiers wake up, and I wanted to have Captain America and Symbiote Spider-Man and Iron Man all team up. And I think I kind of missed the mark on that. So I do want to say, again, Civil War all the way up to Far From Home was the very same, except this No Way Home, you can tell, was very long, it was very different. And the complete story, I really hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you enjoyed my take on it. And I do want to say it's been a rough couple of weeks, it really has been, with so much going on. I do want to say thank you so much for the latest support. It's really incredible, the type of community that we have on this YouTube channel. I just want to say thank you so much. We're on the road to 200,000 subscribers. We're actually less than 2,000 away, so I cannot believe it. We're almost there. Hopefully we can hit that goal soon. I also want to thank John Art Palco for the amazing thumbnail. Very amazing, talented artist. I want to give him a shout out. It's amazing. I also want to give Spidey_Erican a shout out for doing all of the No Way Home, all of the MCU Symbiote What If thumbnails as well. He's a very talented artist too, and I would love to continue working with them. And you know, if you want to support the channel, make sure to check out the Patreon, as it really goes a long way. It's starting at just $1 a month. You can get so many different tiers. Starting at just $1, you can get behind the scenes content. You can even work with the team here at Miss the Part Productions. It's a very interesting thing, so I would highly recommend you check that out. Also, make sure to subscribe to the Instagram page. Make sure to follow that. Also, follow the Twitter page to get all the latest updates. It's kind of crazy how everything's working out, because, you know, I never really used any of the other social media platforms, and we recently just gained 5,000 followers on Instagram, and I do want to say thank you so much for the support. It really, really means a lot. But that being said, I do want to say thanks again for enjoying this complete storyline. I really do hope that you enjoyed the alternate No Way Home events. And I'll see you in the next video, everybody. I know that we got a lot of plans with Spider-Man 6, we got Spider-Man 7, 8, and 9, as well as 10, with The Amazing Spider-Man 3 through 10, as well as Spider-Men. That will be a series that will be coming out later this December. It's going to be very interesting. But that wraps up the Symbiote Saga. For all that, I mean, we could do stuff. We could do a lot more, I think, with the Symbiote Saga, but for now, I'm gonna put it to rest for a little bit because, you know, we have done so many stories. But thank you so much for tuning in, and if you enjoyed, do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn those notifications on so you and your friends are all up to date with the latest content. But anyways, as always, thanks for tuning in, and have a fantastic day. Peace out.